I have brought in some old Guild Wars 2 players just to kind of talk about Guild Wars 2 from an outside perspective. I actually think this is something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And I think it's really interesting to examine what other games think about your game, right? Like the way that interacts. Like, what do people hear about it? Like, how does the marketing work? That this game is perceived this way and that game is perceived the other way, right? In the broader industry. Like, the rumors, the whispers that get shared everywhere.
One bigger streamer in the Final Fantasy community called Xenosis Vex. Like, I asked him on stream once, and his reply was literally, "No, I don't play games that don't have trinities. I played the game when it came out. It didn't have a trinity, and I didn't enjoy it. I don't think MMOs can be successful that don't have a trinity." A reply I got a lot was, "Isn't that game that does jumping puzzles?"
When I first started playing Guild Wars 2, people in my WoW guild actually asked me what I was playing, and they would come to my stream and they would say, "What the fuck is this?"
Oh my god! Certainly, there have been some pretty dark times. Certainly, when you were playing the game, there were definitely some periods where things were a little bit rough. Like, looking at the way the game is now, like, do you not feel that's changed though? Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope you've got your despair ready. Okay, prepare for the despair tea time that I know you've
It's
all
not gonna be that bad. Come on.
I know that you've all been craving it. They all hate the game in the chat. They despise Guild Wars 2. They've got 10k hours. They'd rate it 0 out of 10 on Steam, right? Like, they love this. But actually, no. See? I've actually baited all of you. You've all been baited. You're like, oh, wow, finally. Doom tea time. Doom a tea time. Despair tea time. But no, actually, I have brought in some old Guild Wars 2 players just to kind of talk about Guild Wars 2 from an outside perspective. I actually think this is something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. I think MMO communities tend to be very insular, right? And you're not really interacting with other communities so much. And I think it's really interesting to examine what other games think about your game, right? Like the way that interacts. Like, what do people hear about it? Like, how does the marketing work? That this game is perceived this way and that game is perceived the other way, right? In the broader industry. Like, the rumors, the whispers that get shared everywhere. And of course, we have two incredible gamers to help me do that. We have Rocker, Raider Extraordinaire, Benchmark Police, and of course we have Georges.
Who?
Money Enjoyer.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I can't wait to, like, doom it up in here, right?
Yeah, oh, I'm ready. And I think, like, a good place to start, actually, is because, you know, I think you guys haven't been around so much in Guild Wars 2 recently. Just kind of like a brief introduction through this. So, Rocker, can you just give us a little bit of a talk through, like, kind of your history, right? Like, where you were in Guild Wars 2, maybe what you played before Guild Wars 2, and then what you played after Guild Wars 2. Just what you've been up to. What you been up to these past while? What's going on?
Well, nowadays, I mean, I'll just start at the start, right? I started streaming in Guild Wars 2 way back around the release of Wing 1. Got really into raiding, started becoming more of a streamer around raid content, and specifically around speedrunning. Yeah, did that for a good 3 years or so, I think. And then eventually I quit the game when there was a bit of an exodus when it came to hardcore raiders. A lot of people left, and I was one of them. And lately, since then, I've really mostly been playing Final Fantasy 14. And yeah, every now and then, maybe, you know, giving an unasked take on Twitter or something. Yeah. But other than that, I've been mostly playing other games and kind of watching Guild Wars 2 from the sidelines.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, Final Fantasy, are there any other MMOs, or is just the weeb stuff? Just the weeaboos?
I did play other stuff after Guild Wars 2. Way before Guild Wars 2, one of the first MMOs I ever played was Conquer Online, and after that I played Silk Road Online for a long time, which is a horrible game by today's standards, really. But back then I loved it, and that was like my teenage years. Then I got into Guild Wars 2, and after Guild Wars 2 I basically played Final Fantasy 14 all the way. But every now and then I took a break and I played something else. Like, I played New World during the alpha pretty extensively, I would say. Even though I always missed playing with you guys for some reason, but I did play it quite a lot. And I also played Swords of Legends when that came out. I was really into that game for a short while.
Yeah, you were like big hype about that game. I remember that,
It was really fun, and then it died overnight. It was just gone. Everybody uninstalled over one bad patch, and nobody wanted to give it another try. It's really crazy. Yeah, but yeah, and ever since then, I've always been playing Final Fantasy 14. I really found like kind of a home there in that game, and every now and then I go back and play a little bit of Guild Wars 2 when there's content that I'm interested in, or when there's like friends to do something with. But other than that, I really am mostly playing Final Fantasy. I have a lot less free time nowadays as well, so really
What? Touching grass?
yeah,
Oh,
insane. I
man.
know, but
Unreal.
yeah, the
Okay.
death of every gamer.
Awesome. And Georges, give us the full saga. Give us the jaw saga.
Know?
Yeah. I mean, I think we could get a start at Guild Wars 2. Maybe like the game previous to that you were playing, and then tell us what tell us the story of your journey through Guild Wars 2 and beyond. Because I think you tried a few games after. I know you're doing a lot of real life stuff these days, actually, not so much on the gaming. But yeah, like just give us like the edited highlights of kind of like the journey through the game, like what came before and what came directly after. Because I know that you played a few games as well after Guild Wars 2.
Holy shit. Okay, yeah. Right, so before Guild Wars 2, I was actually playing World of Warcraft. I was a raid lead for a top 200 raid guild. And I think one of our kills was actually like top 50. So like that was actually something that I was really proud of. And I used to invest probably enough time to be like a part-time job playing World of Warcraft. So after I quit after Gul'dan. We killed Mythic Gul'dan, and then I was like, no, I've had enough. I don't want to raid anymore. Everyone else was just like too much to handle. Like everyone's schedules, like when you're a raid leader, you kind of have to look after everyone and control everyone and make sure like everyone's done the strats and all this stuff. So I had enough, and then I thought, oh, what can I do next? And actually, the way that kind of like got me into streaming is because I used to stream our progress to just like my guild. So like anyone that was on the sub, on the bench or whatever, then I would do that. So when I went to Guild Wars, I was actually able to start streaming because I had everything set up already. And then that's kind of like how I developed into making content for Guild Wars. So yeah, that's like, I guess that's the segue. But the actual content in Guild Wars 2 didn't challenge me enough. I wasn't happy with the raid content. I wasn't happy with the dungeon content. So I went into PvP and just kind of found my my niche. I covered this on your stream before, not in a TeaTime, but I was trying to find a time and a content area that was lacking in coverage so that I would be relevant faster. If I'm as honest as possible,
the views, get
the views, make the money. I wanted to be partner, okay. I wanted to be ArenaNet partner, and I wanted to make a bit of money from subs and whatever, right? So I was like, okay, cool. Let's find our niche. And then obviously when I got ArenaNet partner, I was able to do the ArenaNet casting. From the ArenaNet partner, I got the spectate, so I could do the casting of the automated tournaments. And yeah, I guess that just kind of became my thing. It was like tournament coverage every single day. Monthly tournaments were like something I could not miss, and trying to run my own tournaments, which was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, not going to say anything else. So then after, I mean, this is really a saga. Holy shit!
Oh yeah. The Jawbrood saga.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna repeat what I said because I think that's in poor taste. But it did not go down well, and I lost my ArenaNet partnership. So then the thing that I enjoyed most of that time actually was covering PvP and creating guides. And I felt that without the ArenaNet partnership, I couldn't do the tournament coverage, so that was gone. And they left kind of like a sour taste in my mouth, the way that they handled my exodus. So I didn't want to create content for them anymore. So then I didn't actually play any games. I moved to Spain. And I've been there. I've been in Spain, working in southern Spain now for almost 3 years. And I don't have time for MMOs anymore. I tried to. I played Lost Ark. And I played it for about 3.5 months, I think. Didn't spend a penny. then I bought the Founders Pack, and that was it. I think it cost me like £8. And then I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I buy games like all the time, you know, that's nothing. And then it didn't hit me until I think around 1400 item level, which will mean something to people that have played Lost Ark. But around there is when like I was logging in, doing the repetitive daily stuff, and then hated it. I was losing. My honing was failing. I had like a 7% chance, and it took me like 2 days to get those materials. I was like,
Nice.
nah, I can't fucking do this anymore.
Big.
So yeah, I went from playing something really hardcore and raiding to playing something really hardcore and doing PvP to then trying to play something that is a really hardcore game casually, and it just didn't work. So I don't play MMOs anymore. I haven't got time.
I think you played a bit of Final Fantasy as well, right? I think
I did, yeah.
You know, a little bit of that mixed in too. And now that we've got introductions out of the way now, I think the first big point I want to explore, and I think this is a really interesting one, is actually the perception of Guild Wars 2 in other communities. So, and actually, I'd kind of like to go through the before and after, because I think it's great that you actually played World of Warcraft while Guild Wars 2 was out, because yeah, that was in Legion, right? Gul'dan is Legion, so that coincides with Guild Wars 2, of course. So I'd kind of like just to open up to either of you guys just to kind of leap in here. Like, what if Guild Wars 2 came up in World of Warcraft communities, in Final Fantasy communities? What's the sentiment towards it? Like, what do people think about Guild Wars 2? Like, you know, what type of content does it have, right? Is it alive? Like, how many people are playing it, right? Like, you know, is it worth playing? Is it fun to play? Is it good? Like, just anything. Like, what do people think about the game?
You go first, please, Rucker.
All right.
Ooh.
Well, let me prequel this by saying that nothing I say is in any way intended to like hurt
He's
the feelings of Guild Wars 2 players. Like, I want to make that very sure that I have no stick in this. I have no interest in pissing people off.
It's the perceptions, right? It doesn't necessarily reflect reality. Like, let's be careful here.
Yeah, and this is vastly people I talk to and maybe like replies that I got, right? So like, I'm not making stuff up, and I'm not like intentionally like misrepresenting the feedbacks I got when I tried to tell people about Guild Wars 2, which actually did a lot more than people maybe think, right? Like, because I have a bit of a doomer reputation maybe, but within Final Fantasy, I actually talked to a lot of streamers, and I often suggested to them, hey, why don't you try Guild Wars 2, especially in between patches in Final Fantasy, why don't you give that a go? And very often the reply I would get was just that people didn't think it was really on the radar so much, you know, like I got a lot of responses of people that had tried it once. One bigger streamer in the Final Fantasy community called Xenosis Vex, like I asked him on stream once, and his reply was literally, no, I don't play games that don't have trinities. I played the game when it came out, it didn't have a trinity, and I didn't enjoy it. I don't think MMOs can be successful that don't have a trinity. Like, wouldn't even give it another try. A reply I got a lot was, isn't that game that does jumping puzzles? I had somebody ask me, they thought that the game had gone free to play and stopped releasing content back in Heart of Thorns. They just heard that news, and that was kind of all. A lot of people just don't have it on their radar anymore, you know, because at this point it is a slightly older game, right? It's not one of the hype new things that's coming out, so a lot of people just didn't even hear about expansions, you know, don't even really have it on the radar. So that usually would be the reply I get. Like, yeah. And it's very hard to get people, like, to convince people to give it a try, especially streamers, right? When people have, like, their livelihood behind their viewership, and you suggest to them, like, hey, why don't you give this game a try, right? I'd be like, well, will that really work out for me? Is that what my viewers want to see, right? And a lot of Final Fantasy players in particular, they have like a certain taste in games, right? They don't necessarily want something that's very different from what they're playing. So a lot of Final Fantasy players would also say, well, if I wanted to play another game, I wouldn't be playing Guild Wars 2, I'd be playing WoW, right? Because I want more raid content, I want more stuff like this. I'll play games that are famous for what I want. I don't want to, you know, play Guild Wars 2, which I've never heard about their raids before. You know, I just know that it has fun jumping puzzles. Yeah, so it's just sadly not really very much on the radar for a lot of people. That's kind of what I felt.
I think all of those points are actually really interesting, because I definitely get this impression as well. This is kind of a confirmation of my feeling on this topic. I think that a lot of players outside of Guild Wars 2 in other MMOs simply don't really know what Guild Wars 2 has to offer, right? I think people don't know what type of content it has, right? And I think that's actually, I don't think that's an unreasonable kind of impression to get, because I think that unless you're in the game, you probably don't know. Like, I think a really good example would be something that I think yourself, Rocky, you were pretty interested in, which was the recent Harvest Temple Challenge one. Hell, I mean, I imagine you saw this interview. I even talked to Max, right, from Liquid about this. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, wow,
right? Like,
dude.
It was crazy, right? Like, it absolutely was super interesting. But when I was talking to Max, I was like, whoa, I had no idea the game had stuff like this in it. I had no idea it was like this. This is crazy. Like, wow, world's first in Guild Wars 2? Holy shit, that's insane. And I think that that is kind of the state of a lot of players outside the game. Like, there isn't this solid idea of what the game has to offer, because it does have some of these things. And even on the Trinity, obviously it isn't a Trinity in the sense of a like a classic MMO, right? Your full Trinity. But I think even on that element, it's closer than I think a lot of people think it is, right? Like, you do essentially have healer roles, you do have tanks, you do have DPS roles as well. So I think that this information, obviously some of it's outdated and people just haven't researched it, but in a way that the game should be yelling at you, right? Like, the game, the game should be saying, hey, look, this is what we've got, this is what we're releasing, right? Like, come and play our video game. It's got all these exciting things in it. Whereas I think that perhaps with Guild Wars 2, that isn't always apparent.
It's very... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't.
Oh yeah, no, I was.
I think it's very difficult on the MMO market that is so dominated by constant hypes around that new title, around that successful game. Like, it's very difficult to stand out as the game that has fallen behind. The game that has, if anything, had a reputation of not doing so well. Like, that had people leave it, that had news around it of like a lot of people being unsatisfied about it, right? When you have games like Final Fantasy, who are like on a massive like this hype ride, where like everything they do is more successful than what they did before. Then you have games like Lost Ark releasing, which has numbers almost like I think if you look at Google Trends, it's like the only thing that even gets like remotely close to World of Warcraft early numbers. It's
a lot of bots,
like,
by the way, just to say.
Yeah, but nowadays there is, right? But when it launched, it was insane. There were huge numbers, and then you had New World, which was a massive hype when it released. You had maybe not necessarily WoW expansions, but obviously those generate a fair bit of hype as well. But what I mean is, right, like, you have all these big titles that people are looking forward to, that people rarely take the step back and decide, hey, I want to try this underdog game. I want to try this game that I haven't heard good news about so much. I think that's really difficult to do on the greater market, right? And especially what I said before, like, people who look outside of their own game, which not actually that many people do, right? A lot of people are very tribalistic in the MMO, scene, that people don't actually want to necessarily go out, but when they do want to go out, they want to find something that's similar to what they're interested in. And Guild Wars 2 is a game that tried to be very different from all these other games, right? So, not necessarily the first choice.
Yeah, and I think the game being different in a way is very much a strength and a weakness, right? I think it's what you mentioned, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy. Yeah, there's a reason why players kind of translate so well between those games, right? Because they are very similar in the way they play out and the way their content is. I think the game director even said that kind of like one of their goals when developing Final Fantasy 14 was to kind of make the Final Fantasy World of Warcraft, right? That this is intentional, correct, right? That the game is relatively similar in that regard. And I think it's really, I do like that Guild Wars 2 is different, and that's obviously going to come with a side effect that some people simply aren't going to like the type of game that it is, for sure. But would you say, Joel, that your experiences or your experiences of different communities kind of mirror what we were just discussing there with regards to the perception of the game, like, for example, in World of Warcraft and perhaps in Lost Ark as well?
Okay, so when I first started playing Guild Wars 2, people in my WoW guild actually asked me what I was playing, and they would come to my stream and they would say, "What the fuck is this?"
Oh my god!
And it was a meme, honestly. The content was actually in PvE. It just wasn't. There was no perceived challenge. Like, comparing it to progression on Mythic, there was literally no comparison. So you have to understand that those people that were watching my stream were hardcore raiders. They were people that wanted a challenge. So they were just completely put off straight away. Since my exit from Guild Wars 2, I have never mentioned it. I don't go to games and go, oh, I used to play Guild Wars 2. No, I don't.
Partner. I was an ArenaNet partner.
They wouldn't even know what that is. You know, like even if they go, who's ArenaNet? There's nothing. They don't market themselves at all, which we know. So why would any other gamers in the MMO sphere know about them as a company? So I feel like a lot of people came and played the game when it was first released, didn't like it that it didn't have a holy trinity, didn't like that there wasn't content, made a judgment at that point, and then didn't come back. They didn't actually test the game again because they already had a preconceived opinion of what the game was going to be like. The state that I'm in now is that actually from an MMO playing perspective, Guild Wars 2 would probably suit me because I don't have time to play. And obviously there's no vertical progression. I could log in right now and be relevant to raid content, whatever. But off of principle, I don't want to play the game because of like how things went down. That said, even though that like my exit was negative, I still don't feel like even if it was positive that I would go out and tell people to play Guild Wars 2. It just hasn't been.
Really?
Yeah, it hasn't been for me to consider. Like I'm just not there. Like it's not something I would recommend because like PvP, I enjoyed PvP, but I saw it going downhill massively. Right, I saw the lack of interest from the developers. And their investment of their resource into keeping the game mode alive. We know where it's at right now. What we were briefly talking about before with like a couple of content creators that stepped away from Guild Wars 2 during a specific period of content. Obviously the stream don't know this, but this was pre-stream. That in itself highlights that the developers they weren't really in a good space for the content creation scene, and they didn't really care about the impact they were making on content creators. So they haven't given me, even if this was positive at the end, they haven't given me faith throughout for me to go, Guild Wars 2 is a great game. It has reliable developers and a great release schedule, and everything that I'm getting is good. Like nothing. There was a period of time for like 6 months, 7 months where it was all crap. World v World was crap. PvE releases were crap. PvP was crap. There was just nothing coming. So whether or not I got removed from the ArenaNet partner program was never gonna change if I was gonna sing ArenaNet's praises and sing Guild Wars 2's praises. You know what I mean?
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty. I didn't expect that to be so brutal, actually. Yeah, that's a perspective, and certainly there have been some pretty dark times. Certainly when you were playing the game, there were definitely some periods where things were a little bit rough. For a lot of the community, I think there's a lot of negative sentiment towards the game for sure. Like looking at the way the game is now, like, do you not feel that's changed though? Because I think that actually, I'd be very much inclined to agree with you that there have been some times where the game has been looking very much like it's going downhill, like almost like it's. Straight up, I'll be transparent here. There were a few moments where I thought, wow, is this actually the end? Specifically kind of around like season 4, I thought, whoa, is this actually kind of it for Guild Wars 2? Or like, is this winding down now?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I remember a certain credit scene, right? To a
yeah.
that was basically the credit scene to the game to me at the time.
It was.
Oh, that's how it felt.
It was definitely pretty scary, right? Obviously that, but the thing is though, we kind of got Uno reverse carded, right? Like it seems like that was the opposite is now happening actually. Do you see that now, Jordan? Does that maybe like shift your perspective on that a little bit because of the direction the game is going? Because I feel like it's very much on an upward trajectory now rather than a downward trajectory.
Yeah, I think that has actually improved, especially in the last, I'd say, 6 months. The Harvest Temple CM, I was tuning in every day and I was watching it. Mm-hmm. And I was actually genuinely impressed that they put something out that was challenging and didn't nerf it within the first like day. because people were presuming that it was too hard, or like, you know, I saw people in your chat going, I'm never going to be able to do this. And, you know, and I was like, yeah, too fucking right. Like, you shouldn't do it. It's a challenge. It's something you do by option. You don't have to be able to clear it. And then I know there were memes about like, the achievement points and stuff behind it or whatever, and how there was going to be collectors who were going to be very angry about it. But still, it made me happy to see that the developers had actually taken some advice, I think, from people in the community, perhaps yourself, because I know how you were quite vocal about what you wanted and how you wanted challenging content. And yeah, I hope that future releases, because I think there's another one coming, right? There's another challenge mode coming for one of those bosses.
Correct. Yeah, it's coming with the season 1 stuff, right? Like, I think that going forwards, ArenaNet are going to be trying to add strike missions to a lot of story content, and a lot of those strike missions are going to come with challenge modes. If not all of them are going to come with challenge modes. So there should be a lot more content, probably not quite as extreme as Harvest Temple CM. I think, that's going to be more of a rarer thing. And I think that's actually correct as well. Like, if you release that every 3 months, honestly, I think even the hardcore players are going to get a little bit burnt out, right? And certainly, like, the broader community is not going to be super happy about that. Because, like, even now, I think around 250 people have beaten it a month later, so it's quite exclusive. But yeah,
that's insane. That's insane to me, because when I was playing the game actively, there were maybe, and I mean this as the utmost of praise for the games community I can muster, really, is when I played the game, there were maybe 40 people in the game that I would have thought capable of progging an encounter of this difficulty, right? Because I've been in the hardcore community for a very long time, and I know that it always struggled with finding new people, right? There was always finding new recruits that could be as good as your people that have played for all eternity are, right? So I'm actually really impressed that so many people actually did go in there and continue progging it, right? Because I think that's kind of what content like this draws out. Isn't just like the 20 super hardcore players. It just like kind of gets these 200 not quite yet super hardcore players to kind of like get closer to that spot, to like grow that scene and eventually grow the raid scene, right? Because those 200 raiders on top of the 50 that I know that are hardcore raiders and doing speedruns all the time, right? Those 200 players, those basically like grew the raid scene. That's who the hardcore raid scene has been grown by, basically, from my point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm very impressed to see so many people actually.
People have stepped up. The community has definitely stepped up. It's really incentivized people to get good, to be frank, right? Like, it absolutely has. It's very good.
And you don't even have to be like a super gamer to get it, right? But you have to be dedicated to it, and you have to prog it with a dedicated group that be
willing to improve, right? And actually improve yourself, for sure.
It gives you like this long-term goal, right? Not everybody in Guild Wars 2 is interested in that, but like having that goal on the horizon, I think is so incredibly valuable in a game like in any MMO. Like,
that's something that I want to hit here, actually, because I think this is going to be a super interesting question, and I'd be curious if you guys have any like really good examples of this. So ArenaNet's marketing gets criticized a lot, right? I think that's probably perhaps one of the main criticisms that a lot of the community inside and out actually have of ArenaNet. And now I want to think about other games and how other games, like specifically, let's talk about World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy. How is it that people know what these games are about? Because it actually seems to me that a lot of the information about World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy is actually word of mouth, right? Like, the reason why people know that there's hardcore raids in World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, I imagine it's because of people streaming them and progressing them, because that's just the narrative around the game, that, oh yeah, this game has like hard raid content, like great story content or whatever, right? Are there any examples of marketing done by Blizzard and Square that actually actively communicate that, oh yeah, this is a raiding game, this is this is what this game is? Because when I think about Final Fantasy trailers, I see these kind of like, I think like an array of slightly unusual looking characters kind of flailing around and some cool spell effects, right? With giant swords. And World of Warcraft, I'm always reminded of the amazing cutscenes that Blizzard produces, right? To hype up their expansions. And of course, stuff like the world's first race. But like, is there anything that the companies themselves are actually doing that specifically communicate what their game has to offer? Like, what's the difference between, say, Blizzard and ArenaNet in this case? Like, what is there anything specific that's going on there, or is it just kind of a broad atmosphere around the game that actually communicates this?
I can't speak for Blizzard, so I'm gonna
absolutely,
word to Josh really like.
Square, Blizzard, whatever, right? Like all this kind of stuff is absolutely like just in general, like other games, any other game, hell, any other game.
You start, Josh. You start. You were talking.
Okay.
I interrupted
All right.
you.
Okay. So I do work in marketing now. So I do have insight into, how these things actually go, how they're, how people come up with them, what their intention is, et cetera, et cetera. And there's one thing that's clear to me is that I don't think that ArenaNet actually has a significant marketing budget. That's one of the first things that's very obvious to me, because I think they send like one email like per month, so they don't have like a CRM department as far as I'm concerned, and they're like creative output, so like making videos, patch notes, or do they have patch note videos? I don't think so. Every single time that they've come out with like a new storyline, I think there's like one video, maybe is it like every 6 months or something? I saw one mobile ad. So like when you put those things together, then it's quite obvious that they're not investing any kind of budget really into marketing. So I think ArenaNet is heavy on word of mouth. And they get that spread through community, through like, oh yeah, come play this game. You don't have to like invest too much time. There's no progression, blah, 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 blah. Whereas World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, they have massive budgets. That's very clear, because everything that they do is like CGI based in all of their video releases. They put almost like movie-like sequences together where people are actually waiting for the next patch release, especially in WoW anyway, where people can see like where the storyline is going. Is the prince going evil? Like, what's happening? Oh, Sylvanas, what's she doing? People are actually like really invested in like not only the game itself, but also into the storyline that's depicted in the CGI. And Final Fantasy do the same. I know when Shadowbringers came out, there was this huge CGI. Square Enix is really well known for the Final Fantasy CGI stuff, and I think people like really get into that. People watch it and they like it pulls on people's heartstrings, emotion, and they go, wow, that's actually like really fucking cool. I kind of want to see what that's about. And I think that actually does pull in a lot of people to play the game. Which I know it's kind of like, it's hard to explain. There's a lot of people that are just heavily invested in the storyline associated with games, which is probably why Guild Wars 2 still has people playing for the storyline, the season releases, blah, 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 blah. It all kind of ties in. As far as like the raiders go in World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, in terms of that community and marketing, I think that's marketed a lot through Twitch, especially the World First stuff. You've got like 24-hour coverage covering like multiple different guilds, Red Bull sponsoring it. Like it's everywhere. It's all over social media, and there's a lot of hype attached to it. People feel like they're like really into it. They're really like invested in it, because obviously if you're sitting there watching like raid progression, you're like, oh my god, the guild that I want to win is like up first. Oh, they've just killed a boss. You're really invested in it. You're really into it, and Blizzard actually support that. And Final Fantasy, I think this time is his name Yoshi? Didn't he? I think he tweeted something saying like, congratulations to the guild that got the world first on like Roka, you'll know this.
Yeah, Yoshi P is who you mean, right? The game director.
Yep.
And yeah, they do tweet where they congratulate the raiders who were world first. They didn't do it on the last Ultimate because of
ArenaNet did that.
But, Yeah, I saw. Yeah, they did. It was pretty cool.
I think I want to be a little bit more precise actually with my
Okay.
question here, because all of that, yeah, is definitely like good information. But I was specifically trying to target why is it that we talked about those perceptions, right? Oh, it's a jumping puzzle game. Oh, there's no content. Goes, oh, it's a dead game. Oh, this, oh that. Why is that the case? How does that perception come about? Because I almost feel that is actually heavily because of almost a lot of the community chatter rather than the actual marketing from the company itself. Because I think that I think that Square and Blizzard, obviously they do talk about raids. They'll do raid trailers, for example, or they'll tweet those out, they'll upload them to YouTube, right? They'll talk about the features in their next expansion and so on. There will be a little bit about that. But I think as you mentioned, the vast majority of like the wide-reaching marketing that these companies do, it's quite generic. Right, in the sense that it's not going into specifics. It's talking about, oh, look at this cool boss. Look at this super cool thing that's happening. Right? Whoa, there's cool effects. There's a giant dragon. Right? There's a thing. Something's going on. Right? You want to be. This is exciting. Right? Be excited. Get in here. Go. Right? What I kind of was meaning is like, how does the narrative around these games get shaped, and why is it so different, or why does it appear to be so different for Guild Wars 2 compared to World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, and so on and so on and so on, right? Like, what's going on there? Like, why is that happening?
Has
I think
ArenaNet... Sorry, you go.
Are you sure? You can finish your point. I don't mind. I can give you, I guess, a little bit of background for how Final Fantasy does it, right? Because that's the game I very actively follow. And Final Fantasy, they do a thing like, yes, they produce a very hype trailer, and that creates that initial hype, but they do back it up with some information. I think it was 1 year before the launch of Endwalker, they had their first live letter stream event where they actually, over the course of like 4 or 5 hours, explained all the features that the expansion would have. They some of the features haven't been released today yet, right? But they were already being announced there. Like, for example, they're doing like a kind of what's Stardew Valley type content now, like very casual, laid back farming content, and it's called Island Sanctuary, and that got announced a year before the expansion. They announced the release date a year before the expansion. We knew the name. We had cover art for the new raid. We knew who the main antagonist in the raid would be. A year before the expansion. So that info was out very, very early. And if you compare that to Guild Wars 2, I think when did they really drop proper information? I think it started like 2 months before the expansion. They started doing like these weekly streams where they'd actually talk about elite specs and reveal which ones you'd have. Very, very late before the content actually releases, right? So that's like kind of the first thing. You had this input much, much, much earlier in Final Fantasy. And then the second thing in Final Fantasy particular is that Final Fantasy is incredibly predictable and consistent in their patch structure. Like, you always know in every expansion, the first raid is going to come out around 2 weeks after the expansion launches. And then 2 patches after that, it's called, they go in like numerals, right? So like, for example, Endwalker was patch 6.0, and they knew 6.0 would have a raid. And they know that 6.2 will have the next raid, the continuation of that. And they will know, and we already know that 6.4 will have the final tier of that raid. We know that 6.3 will very likely have an ultimate, or that 6.1 had an ultimate released, we know that every patch there will be one fight, one dungeon, So there's just like, based on how consistent they've been over like the last 5 to 10 years, you already know there's going to be certain content coming. So when people call it a raiding game, which, by the way, I don't think is necessarily true. I don't think Final Fantasy is a raiding game. Final Fantasy very much self-defines as a casual, story-driven experience. But there will be raids. That's a given. Nobody questions this. Like, sometimes you have like the cynical memers who'll be like, oh, they delayed an ultimate again. There's just going to be one ultimate and not 2 this expansion, right? But there will be one.
I think that's a great point. That's a really good point, actually, because it's almost like that reputation has been built up by the consistency of the game, right? Like, that atmosphere is created because, oh yeah, they've been doing this for years, right? And I think that is actually a very clear distinction to separate it from Guild Wars 2, because I would say, and I'm pretty sure you guys would agree with this as well, is that I think Guild Wars 2 has really struggled to hit its stride, right? Like we're doing expansions, we're doing Living World, right? But then we're going to do Icebrood Saga, but actually no, we're going to do another expansion. Are we doing raids? Well, we started doing them, but then we kind of stopped, right? Now it's strike missions, right? Like, what about fractals? How about that? What about PvP? What about world versus world? I think that the game has struggled to have that consistency. I think that's an excellent point to bring up there for sure, Rocker.
And even when raids were releasing in Guild Wars 2, they were never really announced. You never really knew. Even after Wing 3, you wouldn't know where Wing 4 was coming out. You wouldn't know if Wing 4 was coming out. It'd be announced like a month before it comes out, and there would be no trailer created around. Do you remember how Wing 4 got hyped up, like with like a Twitter post of a low pixelated?
But that was Wing 5, right? Wing 5, yeah. That was
it Wing 5?
Yeah, it was Hall of Chains. Yeah, that was bizarre. Okay,
but you know what I mean? Like these pieces of content, they never got announced early enough. There was no you never knew if there was gonna be another one, and like that led to this state of depression for every raider. We always thought this might have been the last one, you know? I think especially Wing 7 pushed a lot of people, myself included, over the edge, where it was like, this might be the last raid for another, at least a year. And we just cleared this, including CMs, in like an evening. And not even a long evening, like not even a long night. We didn't even raid until like 5 a.m. We like raided like until like midnight or like 1 a.m. or something, and we're done. Yeah, that was really, really sad. Yeah, oh my god, I'm getting depression again. This consistency factor, though, I actually, before we started this tea time, I thought that, my points tend to be very one-sided because, I'm the hardcore raider guy. I don't really care about much other stuff. I don't care about PvP and that stuff. So I'd ask around. I'd ask on my Discord where there's a lot of people that have also quit over the last couple of years, because turns out my Discord has become a refuge for Doomers.
Quarantine,
and,
right?
Yeah. I just asked them, why did you guys stop? Like give me some input. And something I heard very much was consistency. ArenaNet dropping something because it didn't blow up immediately, instead of committing to it a little bit, dropping ideas, trying new things, and never really knowing when the next content will be out, or if there will be more content that you enjoy.
Yeah, uncertainty is really scary, right? When you're playing a game like an MMO, it's a long-time project. It's a big part of your life a lot of the time, right? Like, especially if you're kind of putting in the hours. So uncertainty in that regard, it's very anxiety-inducing, right? It's not very comfortable to be in that position. It leads to a lot of unrest. For sure, yeah, and it's funny actually, because talking about this, like, with any luck, this is actually what ArenaNet's trying to tackle now, like with their approach to content and strike missions and so on, and even the game balance, right? They've been a lot more aggressive with game balance recently, which is pretty exciting stuff. So, but I think at the end of the day, there's no like silver bullet for this, right? There's no way around this. Like the proof is very much in the pudding. Like if ArenaNet want to change this, they're just going to have to actually do it, right, and just be consistent. Which again, has certainly been an issue. I think I want to bring Jorah now as well, because I think Jorah might have a few things to say on this.
I do actually have I am in agreement with the consistency thing, because I was just going to highlight that ArenaNet hadn't really had anything to sort of shout about. And this is kind of what I was highlighting before when I said that there was a drought and there was no release for PvE, World, PvP, whatever. And I think they were probably, like you say, scared to commit to saying particular things, which is completely turned on its head now, because they've already basically said they're doing another expansion, right? So they have changed their strategy. Whether or not that means they're now going to start marketing the game differently, I don't know. But I suppose things look positive, although perhaps not for PvP. Well, I suppose that we'll wait and see. I don't see like ArenaNet making hype videos surrounding patches or any kind of content coming up. I think they did one for End of Dragons. I'm really not that like clued into the like release schedule anymore, because I'm just not invested in it anymore. But yeah, it seems better. The only thing that I can highlight is that even though I don't play World of Warcraft anymore, when one of those videos comes out that screams about the patch and like the storyline behind it and what's happening, and it's fully CGI and everything, I sit there and I watch it and I remember like the storyline that I played before, and it's interesting to me, and it kind of like, it makes me nostalgic of the game I used to play. I don't think that there's anything like that in the release schedule for Guild Wars 2. You hear things by going to. Honestly, I find things out by going to your stream and reading the patch notes as you scroll through them. There's nothing that screams hype. I don't even know if they tweet about new patch notes. Maybe they do. There's just nothing. There's nothing that markets. So why would I know about it as someone that moved away from it? Their emails go to my junk, and it's usually like, you haven't logged in for a little while. Why don't you come and check out the roller beetle? It's like, what do you mean, dude? Why? Why would I do that? Like, tell me something that's coming out. Tell me something to be hyped about. There's nothing. So it's a very clear difference there. Without being a doomer, there's just being honest. You know, when you're comparing those 3 games. And their marketing.
Yeah. I certainly... They actually do post stuff like this. It gets posted on the forums. They do actually make tweets about it. They post on their official blog as well. But I think there definitely is... You know, whenever I upload a video, I do get this a lot, right? Like to kind of take, you know, to kind of attack the key point here, is that people say, where are these notes? Why can't I find them? It's really hard to find these notes. I get that like almost every video, and that's why I always link them right in the description, right? Because there is a bit of frustration in actually locating this stuff. Obviously, if you browse the subreddit, it's pretty easy to get to, right? All that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of players actually do feel perhaps a little bit disconnected from the news cycle in the game. And yeah, there's definitely a great point about like the hype videos. I love stuff like this, you know, like I don't play World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy, but I kind of can't help but get a little bit interested, right, when I see stuff like this, when I see the new cutscene, right, when I see the new boss, when I'm watching the world's first race. You know, I watched the recent world's first race for Final Fantasy, and honestly it looked fucking crazy. I had no idea what was going on. It was pretty damn hype though at the same time, right? You know, it's kind of got into it because a friend of mine was actually progressing, actually, like playing fairly competitively, actually, to try and get like a decent kill time in as well. And I love watching the World of Warcraft like world's first stuff as well. So I think there is actually another element of that there as well. Do you guys think that the engagement of content creators with some of these games actually has a major impact on the hype and atmosphere? Because of course, World of Warcraft, not the craziest game on Twitch. Neither is Final Fantasy. I think WoW is decently big. I think Final Fantasy is a little bit smaller, if I recall correctly. But obviously bigger than Guild Wars 2, right? In terms of the amount of content creators there. And gets massive when there's something new, right? Like, it's huge when there's a world's first race. Huge when there's a new patch and people are discussing stuff. Do you think that's like a big factor?
It's huge when Asmongold plays. That's when either games pops off. That's
yeah,
like,
for sure.
You can literally look at like Final Fantasy sales numbers, and you can find a direct correlation for the week where Asmongold started playing. It's like an expansion launched on that day. It's actually crazy. But yeah, for sure, I think Twitch community and Twitch, the visibility you get through Twitch, especially on patches like this, definitely creates like a feeling for well, this game gets content, you know, this game gets exciting stuff because every 3 months we get that spike of viewership, that event that my friends tell me about, you know, like that. I think that creates word of mouth as well. And
because it keeps it fresh in people's minds, right? Like, it's like, you know, when you have this spike, when you have all these viewers, it makes people talk about it, right? It creates this conversation around the game, and that spreads out a lot. It's kind of got that critical mass to spread, right? As opposed to with Guild Wars 2, you know, like obviously I'm very famous, and we're all very famous here, but unfortunately we're not famous enough, right?
Incredibly relevant content creators, all of us. Yeah. You know, I would like to, like, for a second, can I backpedal to something Joss said earlier?
Yeah, for sure.
Because Joss was talking about these emails that ArenaNet sends out, right? And the other day, I made the mistake of actually clicking on one of those emails to see what exciting new content the game has to get me back. And the email is titled, "Are you a cat person, Roka?" Question mark. And then it has a GIF of the new cat JadeBot thing, you know, doing its animation. And then it says, "A perfect new companion, the cuddly JadeBot skin. Don't you want to reinstall and buy this pointless skin for some feature you haven't even unlocked in the new expansion?" But that's not it. That's not it, okay? There's more. Obviously, they want to give us a broad picture of what's happening in the game. So the next big point is pour some items on sale. because you want to make your new cuddly Jadebot feel at home, pick up the cat ear hood skin and the ferocious cat ears. And then there's another point that mentions Living World is coming back, and then there's like a giveaway that you can enter. There's like 4 points, and 3 of these points have nothing to do with content. They're just like promotions of in-game skin items they want you to buy, right? And that got me so salty, you know? Every now and then I see something in Guild Wars 2, and I'm at that point when I see it, I'm like, I don't really care much about the game, but then I see something and it really triggers me to like just get really, really mad at the game and the developers. Because like this is the only thing I see about the game for like months. And they just launched a CM that I would have been really interested in hearing about. But this is the email I get, you know? Are you a cat person? And it's just, I'm just cringing. Like, it's cringe. I remember I posted this on Discord because I was so appalled by this email. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Is this just me?
No, I think that is very much a fair criticism. Because they actually did do a Twitter video for the first challenge mode strike mission for Aether Blade Hideout, but they actually didn't do that for any of the other ones. And I know it's actually a real shame because, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware here, Harvest Temple Challenge Mode is really cinematic, right? Like, it is a full high effort, like mega crazy awesome encounter. It's very visually exciting. It would have been awesome to promote that, right?
That could have been marketed so well, right? The final fight you never got. All the epic Elder Dragons at once. The ultimate challenge.
That fits very well into the lore, too. It's very much positioned as the final fight of the Dragon Saga in Guild Wars 2. That's what it is. That's literally what it is, right? That's what End of Dragons was with Dragon's End, the map meta event, and of course with Harvest Temple as well. Is that, yeah, this is the culmination of that entire story arc. This is it. This is the big one. Right.
And that's the kind of stuff that makes me the salty Twitter asshole that I am nowadays, right? It's because like I see something like this, it just gets me so like, it gets me so mad. It makes me so mad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm thinking about that from like a work perspective, and it wouldn't be challenging for them to do. They probably have something in game that lets them know that you've used the challenge mode before or challenge mode. And if they can register that against your email address, for example, then they could have sent you an email, and then they don't have to send that email to everyone in the community, because I think there's some people where a challenge email is not going to be important, right? It's not interesting. And there's probably people that buy fucking furry skins, so now all of a sudden they've got their whales, you know, like I wonder if they send different emails to their whales. I genuinely do, because like, what are they sending them that we don't know about that's making them all that money? I don't know, but it's interesting to me that I also received that cat email. I did not open it. There's absolutely nothing about that subject line that made me want to open it. I do not care about cats in an MMO. Why would I open that?
But I am a cat person, so I felt like I had to.
So you had to open it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
oh, they really identified me. They really identified me.
Kind of going back to the content creator thing, as well. Like, do you think that the just to kind of go back to the original question here, do you think the content creator scene around these games, like, you know, obviously like big creators, like smaller creators, right, hype events, is that like a major component in this, and perhaps also a major contributor to the narrative around the game? Because of course, if you have a really, really big community, if information is talked about there, it's going to completely drown out any of the conversation we have here. Like, again, we can use Asmongold as an example, right? It doesn't really matter how hard we all shout, right, in our stream right now with, you know, like 700 odd viewers or something like that. We're not going to be able to like compete with 50,000, 60,000 viewers, right? It's just impossible. We can't make that much noise to really talk about that. And I think that's why some of these perhaps misconceptions about the game propagate, right? Because it's very difficult to actually counter that, right? It's difficult for us to actually have these interactions because the conversation in a way is out of our control from our perspective as content creators. And perhaps, like, you know, it's out of control from the game's perspective too, because there are just so many people outside of the game kind of looking in at it, right? And just talking shit, basically. So do you think the content creation stuff is an issue there? Like, is there anything that ArenaNet could do about this?
So I also like, I have kind of a theory on this. It's not, I'm not going to call it a theory because then it sounds far too intellectual, and this is more of a tangent. But when you think about like Asmongold and like the variety of stuff that he actually does on his stream, it's not limited to like World of Warcraft anymore. Like he does so many different things, right? So he's pulling in so many different types of viewer with different interests every single day. And it's those people that will watch him play a game, and he'll share his opinion, and then they might base their opinion off of his opinion, and then they will go off into their own little separate communities and share that information or their opinion, right? And that it's word of mouth in a way that comes off the content creator. For us in Guild Wars 2, you have a lot of regurgitation. You have a lot of internal like viewers happening. So, for example, I've said this to you before. The same people that watch you are the same people that watched Roka, are the same people that watched Boyce, same people that watch Syndrina. It's all like recycled viewership. Although you have the top trump, right? You have the higher viewer figure. And I think it's the same for any of the YouTube content because we don't really have anyone that's sharing that content outside of the community. So based on viewer figures, based on people's like watching history or something, maybe they get recommended the video, maybe there's that chance that it could go viral. But is 20,000 views viral, or is that community regurgitation, like just the same people within the community watching that video? So how is that like opinion actually getting shared? So whether or not that video is super relevant, how is that actually having someone external forming a new opinion? Because ArenaNet don't have a big voice, right? I think their social media and their YouTube channel, for example, and their Twitch channel are absolutely dead. There's not much happening. So who is actually the one that's sharing it? Nobody has a voice like Asmongold, for example, in this community. So all we can expect is when we see 20,000 views, 30,000 views on a video, that is standard. That is community regurgitation. When, for example, my video hit like 500,000 views, I was like, okay, now we're reaching an external audience. Like now there's a potential. So ArenaNet, I think, should be looking to market themselves on YouTube and Twitch, not within their own communities, but externally.
Yeah, and I was about to bring up your video. It absolutely can be done, right? Certainly in YouTube. Maybe a little bit hard to do on Twitch. I think stuff like Harvest Temple Challenge Mode and other kind of exciting events can definitely change that for sure. And obviously Arena could bring in other content creators. They've tried to do this a few times with some sponsorship, like Critical is playing, for example, around the Ender Dragons launch and all that kind of stuff. So there are a few people who kind of try the game out a little bit and play the game. But yeah, I think on YouTube, you can definitely reach a pretty wide audience, right? Like, yeah, you've got 500,000 views on a video that says, should you play Guild Wars 2 in 2019, right? The absolute classic right there. And hell, look, it's funny. That's honestly the perfect video example, right? Because guess what happened with that video? Yeah, it actually was reacted to. Okay, you became content. Congratulations, Joy. You were content on Asmongold's channel himself there. So good job on that one. Like really putting in the work there for marketing. But yeah, it can be done. It's just perhaps not quite happening enough. To actually kind of make a difference and like convince people. And I think people are probably a little bit set in their ways as well, right? I think this is like a really difficult thing. I'm actually not sure how to overcome this, because I would actually like to make a video quite similar to that, like kind of like a review style video talking about like the good parts of Guild Wars 2, the bad parts. But I almost feel like being an ArenaNet partner, like absolutely, or being like a not even just a Guild Wars 2 partner, an ArenaNet partner, but also just someone who plays the game a lot. I almost feel like it changes the way people perceive it, because I really like the game and I'm very invested in the game, right? Like, and you have a partnership as well. Like, people get a little bit cynical, I think, when you're in that position. It's like really hard to do it right, I think, to really change people's minds. It has to come off like a very specific way. I think it's hard for players within a game to talk to players outside of a game without like a huge amount of cynicism, I think.
I
Yeah.
think I totally agree with what Jaws said, right? With the whole, within the Guild Wars 2 community, you kind of recycle viewer bases, and like the kind of community tends to stay the same. And I think very often it's not even something that the game developer can actually really affect when it happens that you get a large influx of new players. Because often it depends on how other games are doing, and then you are like, when WoW did really badly, a lot of WoW players started looking at other games, and then they look at what is the most successful, what am I most happy about, and that's how Final Fantasy got a huge influx, right? It's not that they did like a amazing trailer or that they paid Asmongold to give it a look or something. That was all because WoW didn't do very well. People looked outside of WoW, they tried Final Fantasy, and then they were like, "Oh wow, this game is perfect." So the game just happened to be there and be in a good place when the other game wasn't, and like basically catch these players that are going out.
It's a perfect
So
storm, right?
basically,
Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. You just kind of like need to be in a good spot, constantly hoping for that exodus of another game, and for people to then enjoy your game and give you a try, and for that to kind of naturally create a hype. I think it's very difficult to like create a hype out of nothing. To like to consciously create a hype of your game.
So
It's very difficult.
do you think that Guild Wars 2 needs another game to have an exodus in order to be successful and to get an influx of players?
It doesn't have to be like WoW level, but I think every game always goes through like kind of cycles where a bad patch will happen and a bunch of people will leave. For example, just recently, I've seen a lot of ESO players who are really unhappy with an ESO patch, and maybe that doesn't make as big headlines as WoW did when they had their bit exodus. But those would have been players that, if Guild Wars 2 is on the radar, could check the game out and maybe then have a really good time. Maybe a streamer starts, maybe you double your viewer base on Twitch, from like 700 to 1,400 because one big streamer like tries it out, or like, and then you can kind of ripple on from there, right?
So I think that these things happen all the time. You just don't see it. So my opinion is that, for example, I know this firsthand. Actually, like one of my friends, he was in like a top 50 WoW guild, and just out of nowhere, they stopped playing. The whole like raid team stopped playing. So a bunch of them just fucked off to another game out of nowhere. And these types of things happen all the time because mini cliques or mini communities just get bored. So just because something becomes sort of like publicly highlighted by some distaste, obviously you're going to see larger volumes at those points. But if you can imagine like a slow trickle from one game and then a slow rise in another, whatever, like those things can happen all the time. So it's all about retention, because if somebody comes and tries your game out, you need to be able to retain that person with what you have to offer. And this is why, 3 years ago, we were shouting about tutorial systems, making things more clear, not just for PvE, rather for PvP, which was what I was focusing on, but for PvE elements. If you look at the starting area, you get told nothing apart from like how to dodge roll to pick up a chest. These things are just, they're not in place to retain new onboarded customers. And if ArenaNet are focusing on things like word of mouth, then they need to have more systems in place to actually retain the new players that come in from these gradual trickles of people leaving other games.
I actually 100% agree with what you're saying. Exactly. Like, basically, instead of like there's like one or two mass exoduses every 5 years, there's constantly like smaller ones, right? There's always small groups leaving a game. Even in Final Fantasy, my old static actually just recently, they like 8 people basically quit the game. But they went to play Lost Ark, obviously, because that's the big hype game, right? That's the game that supplies the content they enjoy, that they know. So they're progging Vulton Heart modes or Hell modes or whatever it's called there.
How much money did they all invest to get there? Like, I know people that were at the time, like a month ago, people that were doing that content had to have been playing for like 12 hours a day, or having swiped like 500 to £1,000 or euros worth.
I don't think they're like the big whales. I think they're more the type that just plays a lot. But I don't know. Maybe they all whaled. I mean, a lot of people apparently did. So
yeah, I think this is definitely a problem that a lot of MMOs have, right? Like, your game, it can't just be good. It has to be so good that it's worth quitting your other game for, right? And a part of that can be one game getting worse, or having a few bad patches, right? Or having a lull, or having a drought, or whatever. You know, a few bad expansions of a World of Warcraft situation right there. But yeah, it's really hard to keep players in your game because of the nature of MMOs. You have to kind of start again in a way. And I think that's kind of what causes problems with streamers trying the game as well, because there have been a few who've tried Guild Wars 2 and have even like been somewhat serious about it, like trying to get into it and play it for a good amount of time. Of course, we had Summit 1G play a little bit recently. So I'd Stay Safe played the game a little bit, for example. There was also C's, aka CDN the Third, also played the game relatively recently, for a little while there. But there does seem to be this thing where content creators and players tend to not stick, right? Because I think it is definitely difficult to kind of get caught up, right? Like, this is an old game, so players aren't ahead of you in terms of they aren't ahead of you in terms of, let's say, gear, right? But there's a lot of knowledge there, right? Like, there's a big gap in players. When you're a new player, right? If you want to get to kind of that top tier level in PvP or top tier level in PvE, like raiding and stuff like that, it's going to take you a while, right, to get to that. And I think that can feel very, very daunting and feel like a crazy big investment. Oh, look who's in the chat. Max has arrived. Okay, goodness me. Okay, goodness me. We've summoned the outsiders. But anyway, hey, welcome to the stream. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, what do you think are some of the challenges with new players coming into the game, or specifically kind of new content creators? Like, is there just so much of a gap between the established creators in terms of knowledge and the ability to make content? Like, what's going on there?
From what I've seen, so there's a handful of things. I'll limit it. First one is confusion. People don't know what they're doing. They don't really understand the different like metrics or the what's being presented on gear. For example, I think you highlighted this recently. Like, how do you know what expertise is? How do you know like what you should build? How do you know if you should build power or condition? What is your class? Like, there's nothing that tells you really what your class is and what the intent is. So the initial one is confusion. The second thing is that I think people see their view count and their community interest slowly dissipate, because I think the confusion of the streamer is translated back to the viewer. And they, I mean, obviously, whenever you change game from one community to the next, like, you know, you see a drop off. That's standard. But I was watching Stay Safe, for example, when he came, his view count started to drop. And when he first came in, I think he had like thousands. And then when he was on like his last day, or the last day that I saw him stream, he was at like 700 or something. So there was a significant drop off. And I think that because they struggle to possibly, maybe this is a problem with streamers in general, because obviously like you do kind of subconsciously look at your view count, and you look at like success or interest, player interest, community interest based on that figure. And then obviously at the same time, you are still confused by the systems in the game. So you're like, is this really worth it? Is the effort that I'm putting in here like worth what I'm possibly losing? And then I think people just go back to their standard, and Stay Safe went straight back to WoW after he saw that. Summit 1G, I mean, I wasn't there to watch that, but I seem to recall the community consensus was that he was a bit confused. And I think he tried PvP and just got his ass handed to him, and didn't really understand the systems in place that were fucking him.
Honestly, I think Summit was actually a really interesting case. I think that was actually a really big problem of mismatched expectations. He was expecting the game to be very easy and very casual friendly, like a game that he could master very, very quickly, and kind of get to a competitive level quickly. And of course, people who play Guild Wars 2 know that actually PvP is pretty bloody hard to play, actually. You know, it's a very steep learning curve coming into the game. So I think there was like a big kind of mismatched expectation that caused a lot of problems with his enjoyment of the game. I think he actually liked the game a lot. It simply wasn't what he was looking for. He was looking for a game that, right, I'm going to get in here, I'm going to blast it 3 months, get high level, get to a decent level, boom, move on, right? That's the nature of variety streaming, right? I don't think he was bothered that he was losing or that he wasn't, amazing. He was just a little bit daunted or perhaps like, oh yeah, this is going to take me ages to get the hang of. This is actually really complicated. This is really hard to play, which is again kind of like a problem with the perception of the game. It is viewed as a ridiculously kind of casual game, like very, very easy game, but that's not actually the case. And I actually want to quickly point out, it wasn't because he played Warrior, by the way. A lot of people say, oh yeah, Warrior wasn't very good at the time. That's actually true, but in my opinion, Warrior is actually an excellent choice for new players in PvP. Why? Because Warrior is very good against new players, and that's because it has a lot of kiting, mobility potential, and crowd control, which new players kind of at that entry-level skill level are not actually very good at countering. So I actually think that, I know that Warrior wasn't like top tier meta, but only against good players. I actually think that Warrior against new players was actually really good at the time, right? And you can just look at, you could look at other PvP streamers like Boyce, for example. You can see that, right? Like even now, Spellbreaker is not like super, super amazing in PvP, but you can absolutely demolish people in ranked because again, people don't know how to play against it very well. But that's like a really big tangent. Sorry about that. I go back to what we were saying previously. I've just trolled. Okay, I've trolled hard.
No, you stayed on point. I think
yeah, mostly.
I don't think you went too far away. But yeah, I think what's consistent there is, for at least what people are saying in the chat as well, is that people perceived him as not willing to invest the time to read the skills. It's too confusing. There's too much to think about. And then if you imagine that that's someone who plays games for a living, doesn't want to take the time to digest the game and play it to a high skill level, just wants to expect it to work. That's pretty much like, that's Guild Wars 2's community in a nutshell, which is kind of ironic considering the complexity and the depth behind the combat system. But yeah, when there's brand new players that come in and they want to understand, sometimes it can seem a bit daunting and there's not enough systems in place to explain what those systems are.
Yeah. I think that's kind of an issue with MMOs in general, right? Like it takes a while to find your footing and get going, right? And because of that, yeah, like ultimately you might not be able to kind of entertain your audience in the same way while you kind of figure out the game. Like these are complicated beasts, right? It can take a long time to get to the point where you are as comfortable in the game as you are in your original MMO, for example. And of course, like inevitably with streamers, until you kind of transcend games to be like a full just chatting streamer, basically, with games in the background, which kind of is like the end stage for all content creators. I feel like these days, that's the meta, is you want to get to the point where you just have like some moving pixels in the background while you just kind of just flail wildly at the stream and talk to everyone. That there is obviously going to be like, people are invested, right? And this is particularly true with MMOs, although I would say it's with other games too, actually. If we think about some other streamers, think about Ninja, right? Like Ninja obviously was like really, really massive in like the battle royale scene, right? But then actually, like he was like, you know what? I'm just gonna stream like I think it was Final Fantasy VII, right? He was like, yeah, fuck it, I don't care. I like this game. I'm playing it.
It was 11,
right? Oh, 11. Okay, yeah, sorry, a number. Like how many of those games you guys gonna make? Come on, man. Like
16 is coming out soon.
What is going on, right? But yeah, all this goes. So there's gonna be like some inherent viewer fall. So it's like it's very risky, right? Because you're going to have to invest a lot of time into an MMO, and you might not get the payoff of potentially getting that viewership as a content creator coming in from another game, right? You might not get it, right? You might, and you might be able to be very successful and kind of play that game for a good amount of time, or even semi-permanently, right, on and off, whenever there's new content, add it to your repertoire, as it were. But it might not work, right? Because again, you're going to have to put in a lot of hours for sure. It's a very interesting one.
There's always like an initial hype, right, that happens when a bigger streamer enters a game. I think it also very much depends on the size of said streamer. When like a big multi-thousand streamer plays Guild Wars 2, they tend to have like that first 1 or 2 days where they're like massively hyped and everybody's talking about, oh, that guy's playing the game, dude, look at, Maximo was here earlier, right? Maximo is playing the game, what a hype, right? I remember a lot of people, would go into Discords and be like, hey, look, this person is playing the game. But over time, the more they play it, that hype will eventually kind of fade out, and then you have to, as a streamer, I think, see like how many viewers are left now. Is this like good for my channel, basically, to stream this for a longer time, or will I drop down below my usual average if I just keep playing the game I play, right? And if the stream is your livelihood, you may very well think about whether how much of a risk you want to take and how long term you want to do that, right?
You know, I often wonder if ArenaNet or games companies in general could help out with this. Like for example, I kind of had this idea that was kind of related to the WoW World's first, which I really enjoy because of course both Liquid and Echo tried out Final Fantasy rating, and that was like super hype, right? I think like the Final Fantasy community loved it.
So
right? People were going
hype,
crazy.
Dude,
People were absolutely going crazy.
Dude,
for that
was really good. That was really, really fun.
You know, and you know, I was like, dude, wouldn't that be cool in Guild Wars 2? Just kind of let them loose on the strike mission challenge modes and see what happens. It would be so cool. You know,
I always wondered how how raiders from other games will actually fare in Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, how they approach it,
and how Guild Wars 2 raids tend to be their reputation to be very easy, but to new players they tend to be like, you know, bone crushingly difficult. And I always wondered, like, is somebody who's so mechanic driven, somebody who's so good at figuring out mechanics on bosses that don't have all that many mechanics, but it's really difficult to play on a base level, you know, to do well. How are they going to fare against this very unique kind of content? I always wondered about that. I've tried so many times to like get a really good Final Fantasy group to just like stream their prog and like prog through all of the Guild Wars 2 raids just to see, because I'm so curious how they would do, because it's so different.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Joel. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's also like the element of horizontal, right? Because when you look at I don't know, Method, for example, when they were going for the world first, it's all about min-maxing the gear, you know, and making sure like, oh, you've got to get that item level. Oh, if we get that one, then we've got the edge. We've got that bit of extra damage. They will just be in a position where they are at as good as they're going to get in terms of gear. So everything has to come down to like perfect mechanical ability. And I think that would be an interesting like comparison for them going into like the Guild Wars 2 raids. But I think it would be interesting as well, just if they don't look at any guides, you know, they go completely off of their own learnings the same way that they would through like the world first race, for example. Then I think it would be interesting to see if they absolutely smash it or if they get frustrated with the systems, because it is different.
And I wouldn't even stop there. I think you can do that for every game and every game mode in every direction. I would love to see the top 5 ranked PvP players in Guild Wars 2 form a I don't know what it's called in WoW, but like form a competitive PvP group and go to other games, you know, and just see how they do. I think that would be really fun stream events.
Yeah,
you know, like watch a PvP group conquer New World or something. The best World versus World guild in Guild Wars 2 tries to conquer the entire map in New World or something.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is really good. For sure, it's like really exciting. Like, do you think that it will be good to almost like enable this really early for some of these guilds? Because I think that, you know, kind of it's going to take you a while to get through the game and get into the content. Although I assume that the guilds actually did this in Final Fantasy and kind of went through the leveling process and through the story process and getting gear and so on and working through it. But I guess in Guild Wars 2 it's a little bit less of a thing. And that's an advantage in my opinion, right? You can kind of play the game and get your gear and then, you know, quit and come back and you can immediately leap in. But I was wondering, like, you know, for stuff like this, right? Like saying, oh yeah, let's see if we can challenge this guild to do this. What do you think about the idea of almost giving players like test accounts where they have like all the gear, like full legendary, and they can just play whatever they want? Like, you know, if they actually want to play the game, then it would kind of like all get deleted, right? Like it wouldn't be, you know, they wouldn't just get everything for free. It would just be like just for like this test event, like, oh yeah, come and play the raids for like 2 weeks. Right, and we'll give you like we'll give you like full legend. We'll give you all the gear. Is that throwing people in the deep end too much? Do you think?
I dislike that because that's playing people to. At this point, it's a paid event. At this point, you're a hired actor, you know, supposed to not hate the game, and that takes away the credibility. Because I want to see people properly prog through, have the full experience. I don't want to see them like, you know, play through the story and farm exotics gear or something, right? But especially in Guild Wars 2, it would be so easy, right? You could literally skip to 80. Spend a night on the training dummy, just go in with exotics gear, add that little extra bit of challenge and spice, you know? And it'd be fine. And I dislike the idea that the developers should pay people or, like, basically hire people to do it. I think it should be a little bit more intrinsic than that.
Okay.
It could also backfire, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that people really dislike it, right? Or like that they clear it in 5 hours, and then the reputation in the WoW community is forever ruined.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Like if they make it look like it's an absolute meme, and then ArenaNet's like, yeah, we paid for this, woohoo, and then it's fucked. So it has two.
Oh, I remember a certain stream now. I remember a certain stream, but like that was apparently sponsored, and everybody was like talking about it because it didn't look so.
Yeah, there
so
have been
spicy.
some questionable marketing campaigns. That is certainly true.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is a danger. I feel like when Wing 7 released, I actually I was streaming really actively at the time. I was planning a big event for it. I had even requested to be put on the German main page for Twitch, and I was really excited for it. And I talked to the people in the partner program a lot at the time. I got special codes for giveaways. They were really supportive too, right? But then the raid was just so underwhelming. It was really difficult to be hyped, It was really difficult while you were in the spotlight to be very excited about the content, because people would come in like 2 hours after the release and they'd be like, where are they? Oh, they're on the final boss, Like, and we'd be like, yeah, we're disappointed too, guys. It's not just you guys in chat. We're also not happy about this. And I felt I was really, really disappointed about that stream in particular, because I felt like I'd not only like let my stream down, but like I'd kind of let the game down in a way, because I just wasn't very excited about the content. I was so let down by it. And so having that broadcasted to a larger audience, not necessarily the word of mouth that you want.
Yeah. It definitely is interesting, because this does seem to be a recurring thing, and this is actually said by Max in the chat, like during this very stream, he said something along the lines of, it just didn't feel like worth playing. Like I played for a few days, just didn't feel like I wanted to continue. Right? That's interesting. Yeah. I wonder why that is. Right? Like why is that the case?
You need these CMs. That's why you need these CMs to keep happening. Why I'm really pushing, like they should continue doing these CMs. Maybe not have Temple CM, but I think the way they've been doing it has actually been really, really nice. 2 slightly easier ones, one that's pretty challenging, and then one that's tough as nails, right? Do them like every 3 months. So once a year you get basically an ultimate. Once a year you get a challenging one, and twice a year you get one that everybody will finish fairly easily. I would think everybody probably cleared Anka and Scarlet fairly easily, right? Those weren't like huge contesters for difficulty, but then of course Kaining Overlook. I think it actually is a really nice comparison to how Final Fantasy does their raid encounters, right? Because Final Fantasy raids, they're also split into 4 encounters, and they ramp in difficulty. The first 2 will be fairly easy. The third one is usually a significant step up in difficulty, and the final one is like twice as difficult as all of the ones before, right? So I think that kind of leads to like this balance where everybody gets something, because you don't want to leave out everybody who doesn't play 24 hours a week, right? You do want to have something for everyone, but you do also want to have that special niche content that then gives players like Maximum a reason to play, a reason to maybe consider, hey, there is something at the end of the grind of like the end of this early game that maybe right now isn't super catching me.
But then Maximum is probably one of those people that's used to recognition for completion of things that are difficult, right? And maybe there's just not that kind of recognition in Guild Wars 2 in terms of like...
Oh yeah, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. You actually said earlier, funny, sorry if I'm interrupting you, but there's like a fun anecdote for a second. You said earlier how like you can't really brag with having played Guild Wars 2 very much. I remember applying to a hardcore raid group in Final Fantasy, and they asked me about my experience, and I said, okay, I've hardcore progged like maybe 1 tier before, and but I used to hardcore prog in another game for years, and I used to like be really into speedrunning and shit. And they were like, oh, WoW? Did you play WoW? I was like, no, Guild Wars 2. They were like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're gonna have to trial, That just isn't really very much of a reputation to it, yeah.
Yeah, there certainly is a little bit of lacking prestige. I think that will just take some time to get built up, because I think there actually is now prestige to be had in the game. Yeah, absolutely. I would say that, well, maybe it hasn't really got to the public yet, but I actually do think if you can beat Harvest Temple challenge mode, yeah, I think that's something to be genuinely
that's one,
proud
though.
of. Well, that's what I mean. One thing. It's going to take a while to build, right? Yeah,
so like years. Because
yeah,
I mean,
no, I think so. Yeah, for sure. I think it will take years. Yeah.
Does the game have years?
But it's But it's been the same in Final Fantasy, right? It's taken them years to build that up as well. And yeah, it's a very interesting point.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
Wait, do
because
you think
they had Savage. Like they've had Savage and they've had like hard the first coil of Bahamut that they released was actually a challenge. There was not a lot of people that were actually clearing that in Final Fantasy when it came out, and they've progressively made the content harder. The actual like dungeon content is not a challenge, but the Savage mode's actually a challenge, and then these ultimates actually even harder. So they've already set like a skill level requirement for reaching these things, which they deserve recognition when you actually kill them. We're talking like this game has been out for like Guild Wars 2 has been out for like 10 years, and they've now released something that now only 200 people in the community can clear. Is that because the Guild Wars 2 community does not have skilled people in it as a high percentage, or is that because that's the first time something like this has been released and people haven't aspired to be able to do that content? Like,
well, it's both, really, right? Like the reason you don't have these players is because the game hasn't had this content, right? Most of the hardcore players have mostly left, right? Of the PvE players that usually would play this game. Like you didn't have old Quantify, old LN, old what other games we have? You didn't have guilds like HP or I mean, there were sort of like King, all these skills don't really exist anymore. That if they were all still around, you'd have much higher like numbers of people who have cleared early on as well, right?
Do you think this is really a problem though for like newer players? Like the idea that there's kind of prestigious stuff at the end game. Do you think that's something that's in the mind of a lot of players?
I think so. I think I've heard the testimony of players who have said that they do care about stuff like this at the end. So, like, I've had a friend. I was talking to another streamer from Final Fantasy who actually quit Final Fantasy, and he was actually considering streaming Guild Wars 2 for a while, and that was one of his points why I didn't think it would be worth playing, because he was worried there wouldn't be anything at the end to keep him challenged, because there's all the feedback he got, right? Was like, oh, the raid is actually leaving that game because there's not enough challenge. So, like, is it worth for me, as you said before, to invest all that time to get good at the game, to get gear in the game, if there's not going to be content for me?
So to kind of detach it, I want to almost generalize this a little bit. Do you think that Guild Wars 2 has a little bit of difficulty with, how do I describe this? Almost like by intrinsically rewarding players, or wait, what would it be actually? It might actually be extrinsic, like I'm trying to talk about here. In the sense that, right, that rewards aren't cared about, they aren't prestigious in Guild Wars 2. Do you think that's actually important? Because of course, a prestigious reward doesn't actually have to be a hardcore raid reward. It could be, oh, you grinded something. Oh, you farmed this dungeon to get this mount. Oh, you farmed this skin. Oh, you did this achievement, this collection, right? Do you think it's actually that the rewards aren't prestigious enough? They don't have kind of external value, extrinsic value to kind of basically show off? Because I think that is something that a lot of players in MMOs care about, right? Is that, they want to have the mount and show it off to people. They want to be walking around with that title on, with the sword, with the, the super cool tier set that you get from the raid, right? All that kind of stuff. Like, is that something that perhaps is? Because, I want to slightly decouple it from talking about, hardcore raiding prestige, and kind of centralize it more to the concept of prestigious rewards, but not necessarily hardcore prestigious rewards. Just the idea that the rewards are meaningful, and it's like, oh, I'm proud of this. I'm accomplished, right? This makes me a badass, right? In the game.
I think we have to break that question down a little bit into what you're asking for, right? Are you asking for, here's a cool skin that not many people have? Or are you asking for a skin that basically isn't worth it because of what it looks like? It's worth it because of the achievement that it stands for, right? Like you get like this infusion that you can only have if you've beaten HGCM. I would argue that makes that infusion the most valuable item in the entire game. Because you can
buy it.
Okay. Well, but the title then, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Okay, I stepped into that one, but you know what I mean, right? Is it the what it represents, or is it about the item? Because you could say, like, you could give every raid boss every week award you 100 gold. Does that make it prestigious to beat the boss?
No, of course
not really, right? And I would say Guild Wars 2, from my perspective, has lacked this for all eternity. I don't think there's ever been a title in the game that was truly like an achievement to have, because like you could usually buy it, even Voice in the Void, you could buy it for like a couple hundred gold, which is equates to what, like 5 hours or 10 hours of farming somewhere. You could buy that title for, which was the most prestigious in the game. And having just one thing that you cannot buy and that is truly prestigious, I think is important, just to like have that light at the end of the tunnel, that knowledge there is something like this. I think that is important. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just important to me, and like half of chat will say like, "Oh, it's pointless. Nobody cares." But I found it when I played Final Fantasy XIV. One of the things that made people a lot less toxic was this actual acknowledgement of somebody's achievement. Like you've beaten an ultimate, and even your cynical hardcore player friends who, like to put their achievements first, even they would like go around. They'd be like, "Okay, hey, dude, that was really good, man. Congratulations, you actually got an ultimate title. That's really big." There'd be a general acknowledgement. Whereas in Guild Wars 2, you kind of created, like, especially in the hardcore scene, I think, like kind of a really toxic environment festered, where everybody, because there was no true achievement, you'd always have to do it better. You'd always have to do it like, oh, you soloed that boss. Oh, but you used this class, so it's not worth something, Oh, you soloed this boss. Oh, but you had your trinkets on. Oh, you soloed Lupicus. Oh, but you didn't do it in less than 20 seconds. Nobody actually valued your achievements. If you did a cool record, people would say, "Oh, but you abused that comp," You figured something new out, and people wouldn't generally, very often, not like congratulate you for your achievement, but they'd like rather find something wrong with it. That was just my impression.
Or it's almost like the community has to evaluate things rather than the game doing it for you.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
In other games, the game is going to tell you to an extent, right? This was good job, right? Like this is like a valuable thing that you've done. This is an impressive thing that you've done. Whereas in Guild Wars 2, it's almost left up to the community to decide that, right? And to have these standards set. I think that's a really great point. I think this kind of leans into aspirational content and aspirational rewards that players can go for. And I do think this actually is a big criticism that I think a lot of players would have, and a side effect of some of the things about Guild Wars 2, because Guild Wars 2 is very much focused on accessibility and player choice. Like, you don't have to engage in any type of content. You can, broadly speaking, get any reward by playing any content, which is obviously nice because it means you can do whatever you want. But the downside is that it definitely does make those rewards a lot less meaningful, right? They become very mushy and they lose their value in the reference frame of the game, right? Like everything just becomes just lukewarm, right? Like it's all very and in a way that's a hard thing to actually address in the context of Guild Wars 2, because that's a design feature of the game, right? Like that actually is the way the game is intended to be, right? It's not a bug, it's a feature, which is difficult, and I think that is actually very much of the kind of the nugget within the point that we're talking about here with like the rating thing, is that I do think that is a major draw for players of all skill levels, actually, is the idea that your actions in the game are extremely meaningful, right? And you're investing your time, and the game is you're getting something that really has value within the context of the game. It's like a legitimate achievement, right? Like, oh yeah, you did this, it was cool. Oh, you farmed this dungeon 1,000 times. Oh, you did this really hard boss. Oh, you collected all these things. And I guess there's some stuff like that in Guild Wars 2, but perhaps not quite enough, right? And that might cause some players to fall off a bit. What do you guys think?
You know what's interesting? I've kind of just realized this, that in PvP, they have the gizmo, right? And they do Tournament of Legends, where they basically give you like a free legendary for winning the tournament, right? Why is there no PvE system that grants you either of those benefits for completing like Harvest Temple CM, for example, the first time? Like, or like what they ran TOL, right? Maybe they don't do it anymore. I don't really give a shit. But they ran something that gave an exclusive reward. Like, why don't they put that type of system in for PvE raiders? Like you imagine
Top
you're the
100
first,
or something like that.
You're the first team that kills the boss, so you get given like, I don't know, a free legendary of your choice, or you get a gizmo that has that fucking the icon of the boss above your head or something, and that is maybe that cycles like the same way that they cycle the monthly automated tournament gizmos. But why aren't they translating or transitioning that from PvP to PvE as well? Because then there would actually be a competitive scene that maybe they get away with it in PvP because like there's not enough of a community. Like it's such a small percentage that people in PvE don't really give a shit about gizmos, right? Like no one's actually like looking at that scene and going, "Oh, I want a gizmo." But like there's fear of missing out within PvP, but not from the PvP community asking for fucking gizmos. Like nobody in PvE is asking for the PvP gizmos. They don't play it. They're not bothered. So who cares about FOMO when it's PvE people competing for PvE rewards? Like work for it. There's your reasoning. There's something at least, something that recognizes you apart from the pack. And if you want to encourage people to actually go and do these things, you need to. And the mounts thing that you said earlier about like from killing particular bosses in World of Warcraft, that was massive because obviously only one mount dropped every single time that you killed the boss, and the person that got it, everyone's like, put the mount on, let's take a screenshot, put the mount on. And then you'd be fucking posting it on Twitter, you'd be posting it in Discord, showing your mates, showing other guilds. You'd be like, look what we just got, bitch. I just used all my DKP for the last 2 years on this shit. You know, like you've literally it meant something. It meant something like for some reason. And I couldn't give a shit now, but at that time it was super important to me. So you definitely have to give people the desire, like the reward, the desire. And just because ArenaNet want to identify themselves as like everybody can do everything within their community, every element of the game gives the same reward, 1v1, PvP, PvE, do the reward tracks, get it. You don't want to play the story, that's fine. You can get the rewards through just by doing this, whatever. Like, but still give people desire to achieve something. And if you make everything so blanket easy, then people aren't going to go, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to play that, I'm going to get that. No, they just won't. Because what's the fucking point? There's nothing that outlines that as special.
And to be clear here, like what Joe's kind of getting at here is making it a little bit comparative. It's not just about exclusive rewards. I think that is important, but it's kind of like, ooh, you know, the top, you know, in World of Warcraft, for example, there are titles for if you defeat the boss before the next raid tier releases. I believe that's basically the way it works, right?
Yeah.
On the hardest difficulty, right? Like that's the way it works. So you can get like a cool title for doing that. Now, I'm not saying they should do exclusive. I think that might be a bit of a bridge too far. That might upset people. That's going to rustle people. And I understand that, right? Guild Wars 2 is not a game like that. But I think it would be cool to maybe give like some slightly more generic stuff out. Like, you know, if you're in the top 100 guilds to clear a really, really hard piece of content, then great. You could get like a bunch of gold, like you get like a prize for doing it. Like really, I think that makes it exciting, makes it competitive, right? I think, yeah, a PvE gizmo would actually be really cool to give to the top guild or to the, you know, the top 10 guilds or whatever, right? Whatever they'd want to do, right? I think stuff like that, it would make it really exciting. I think it would really get people engaged with this stuff and certainly create a conversation, right? Like rewards like that are exclusive. Yeah, they're fun and they're exciting because they're exclusive. I think it's a little bit against the spirit of the game in a way, so I'd understand why ArenaNet wouldn't want to do that, but it certainly works for those other games, right? For sure, right? Like, I think the World's First stuff, right? It's very exciting, even to players who don't raid, and it's very exciting to me. I don't even play the goddamn game, right? And I'm really interested to see who's going to win, right? I'm like, ooh, who's going to get it, right? I'm cheering, let's go. Who's going to win? It's really fun to watch.
I feel like in a way it's not even really necessary, and I think a lot of game developers will try to not make PvE releases all about competition, right? I think that's like a very good side effect, and that has emerged over the years in these races, but I don't think that's what they want it to be all about. And I wouldn't necessarily want it to be all about that too. Although, I mean, personally, I'd like it, but I very much realized that I'm probably 1 out of 40 people in the game who are really into this, and everybody else probably is just pissed off by this. You know, so like, I'm not gonna like die on that hill, right? That's not something I would fight for. Yeah. But like, I think it just boils down to content. You don't necessarily need this. If once a year you have an encounter where the community keeps track of who beat it, and you just get like that one tweet from the developer, that is worth every title in the game to me.
Well, the thing is, I don't, you know, on this, we're kind of almost, I feel like we're maybe being a bit too cautious because nobody cares about the gizmo, right? From the monthly AT. And I don't think it has to be FOMO either. Like, you could just be the same one every time, right? Like, you get like a funny hat for getting a world's first or like a top 10 finish, right? Or something like that. Maybe top 10 might be too many because I don't think they don't want to overcook it, right? They don't want to give like loads of gizmos away, right? Like, otherwise, it's going to be like everyone running around with one of these things. I don't think it has to be.
It's hard for me to.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to argue against this because obviously I would want this, right? I'm just assuming that a lot of people probably take issue with it. So it's like I'm just like I'm saying I'm fine with new content where beating the content is the achievement and maybe getting a title. Right?
I'm just not entirely sure if people would actually be super against it within the community because again, like I don't think people have ever complained about the monthly AT gizmo. There were some complaints about achievement points, funnily enough, being behind stuff like Best of the Best and the Rank 1 titles. But in my opinion, that's a non-issue because raiders don't care about achievement points at all. Just make them 0 AP. Job done. Who cares, right? It's fine to sort out there, you know? And I think that, I don't know. I think honestly, leave your comment below because I'm actually not sure. Like, I'd be a little bit worried about it, but I'm not sure. I don't think people would care. I think people look at the gizmo and go, "Oh yeah, fair enough, right? These players are the best of the best. They deserve it, right? They won. Fair play. It's a competition. GG." And I think it's kind of the same thing with something like a race to worlds first, or like, you know, to clear this content. It wouldn't be a one-time thing because we know there are going to be consistent strike missions. So you'd have, just like the monthly, you'd have multiple opportunities to win. And it would almost be very like the monthly, right? It's a one day or like 1 week long thing or whatever, right? Commit, get in there, blast, play, win, lose, whatever, go next, right? You just have to wait and prepare and go for the next one. It'll be a little bit less frequent than the monthly, but I don't know, leave your comment below, chat. Let us know.
How about instead of a gizmo, you know they have this outfit shit that they release. It's mainly fucking like gem store content. Why can't they just associate like a hard content reward with like an outfit? Because I think doing individual pieces would just be kind of stupid, and like then they'd have to like put skills, you know, the stats and everything on them, and like, is it legendary? Is it not legendary? Are we just going to do this as ascended? Like, what if they just do an outfit that you could wear for prestige? You know, like everybody that clears that has like a, I don't know, like a 1 in 5 chance of getting it or something. And then
you don't even. Yeah, sorry. I think you actually don't even have to go nuts with this, right? I think people, you could literally just change a small detail about something that already exists, and it would already fill that niche, right? They wouldn't have to create a new skin from scratch. They could just take that one cape and replace the one icon on it with a raid portal or something.
Like the thing that I hate is that pretty much all of the skins that are achievable in the game, besides possibly legendary armor, actually look like dog shit compared to the gem store. They genuinely do. They're always coats. They're always like awful clipping. Like you look at the outfits that are available on the gem store and you go, why the fuck is this not in the game? Genuinely. And people are like converting gold to gems to buy these outfits, obviously, because they do not want to wear the base game skins. Why don't they develop base game skins? Like, develop something or give people actually nice outfits that they can wear or achieve through the game so that they don't have to wear the terrible base items, you know, like just something. Obviously it's cash cow, right? It's fucking swipe, make a bit of extra money. I get it. But don't you think that you've done enough? Like everything, like the whole basis of the skin system being in the gem store, do you not think you could give one thing? Like, especially as an exclusive reward that not everyone's gonna get, you know, like people are still gonna buy other stuff on the gem store. Like you've got like 99 outfits on there. I'm sure you can put one on the end of a boss. Like it's just, I don't know. It's a bit boring to me.
I think you're opening like a whole can of worms when you start talking about reward structures in Guild Wars. I think reward structures, that's also been one of the points that's been very frequently mentioned by people that I asked over the last couple of days for this stream today about why they quit. And a lot of them said it's terrible rewards. Everything has to be monetized. Stuff like build templates turned them off. Stuff like, you know, there can't be a true prestige reward because it will be overshadowed by the gem store somehow, right? Because they cannot give an in-game reward that will basically reduce people's willingness to pay money for the game, basically. And I think that's such a hard wall to jump into when you talk about how to make content exciting for players. Because Final Fantasy gives me some really good examples, in my opinion, of rewards that are really interesting that aren't treadmill related, you know? But you couldn't do them in Guild Wars 2 because of Gemstore. Like, you always kind of like bump into that final wall of an argument of why that couldn't happen if you talked about these things, you know?
Yeah, you then talk about the fact that it's not a sub-fee game, right? It's a microtransaction game.
Yeah.
And so this is inevitable. This is the trade-off you make for
Yeah.
not having a sub-fee, is that realistically, a lot of the rewards in-game are going to be subpar, and a lot of the stuff in the cash shop is going to outclass the stuff in the game. It just has to, right? Because that's the bit that is a necessity of the business model. And to be clear, I'm not making a judgment there. I'm describing it, right? Like that's just the way it is, right? Like, I think there are pros and cons to both of these, right? I think there are pros of sub fees and there are cons of sub fees, and there are pros of MTX and there are cons of MTX as well, right? That's just the way it is.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely. I'm not trying to make judgment either, but I do think it can be a deterrent. I think it can be a factor of why raids are, less interesting to a lot of players. Like, why a lot of designs that you think are fixable aren't fixable in Guild Wars 2, because they cannot design around certain rewards because they need certain monetization structures to stay intact. And that's I think that's definitely a factor that affects new players' interest in the game, right? Like if they, if their friend buys the game and he spends $100 on the gem store and he's running around like he already beat all the other dragons, right? And they're running around in their like dirty rags, and they just beat the dungeon and they carried their friend on their backs and they get like a bag and 2 green swords that they can't equip on their class, that might feel bad. And yeah, I've definitely gotten the feedback that people played other games and they experienced what it feels like to get a cool reward through combat, through an encounter, and then they get hooked on that feeling, right? Like you imagine you are that person who quit Guild Wars 2. You have experienced this as a problem. You've been annoyed by this over years, and then you play Final Fantasy. And you're like, oh wait, this extreme trial gives me a cool mount skin that I can get if I'm lucky. I'm gonna continue grinding this mount skin now. And after like 50 kills, I finally got it, and I feel so happy about it, and I feel so achieved because I've spent so much time and so much effort into it, right? And you have all these players playing that new boss fight because of that new mount skin, right? It populates the thing. The PF is very active, like the LFG in Final Fantasy is really active because of it, right? And that can really get you hooked. That feeling can really get you hooked when you come from a place where that hasn't been the case.
But that's not what Guild Wars 2 is, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you put that kind of thing into Guild Wars 2 without pissing everybody off? That's like the whole argument, really, because even like where I'm saying that I find that the base skins in Guild Wars 2 are terrible, and that everything else is accessible that looks nice is on the gem store. People can argue, oh well, you can just farm the game, turn the gold into gems, buy the skin, whatever. But that's an instant gratification with no effort, right? And when you're trying to inspire people to play the content to see that reward, then you have to not just put everything on the gem store just because you're a microtransaction game. You can do both. You don't have to make it the best skin you've ever made. It doesn't have to be the best thing that's ever been made by ArenaNet's fucking creative team. Just something that that makes that thing exclusive. That's essentially what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be something insane. It just has to be exclusive that makes people want to do that content, even though it's hard, and it gives people something to aim for. Because you can still make the money on the gem store. The mount skins, like all the different mount skins they release, all the different, like all the bloody seasonal ones, all the random fucking ones they come up with. They turn a fucking raptor into, I don't know, like a fucking elephant. Like they do anything they want. They will make money from that. But they could still have something that's exclusive and will give people like a reason to play the game.
I want to quickly qualify for the chat because I see terms being thrown around like gameplay loops and it's always about mounts. I'm explicitly talking about the mounts and X-Trials because those are disconnected from the regular gameplay loop. Those are disconnected from the gear treadmill and everything. You can farm them at any point, and it's not part of just like a loop. That's just a base reward you can always go for that makes a boss rewarding.
And when we're and by the way, guys, like just to clarify another point, I want to do a second clarification here. Why is it that we can't get a few mount skins in? Well, it's realistically because if ArenaNet start putting mount skins in the game, every single time there's a new skin on the gem store, it's going to be, why is that not in the game? Like, they're going to get it. It's a psychological thing, right? Right now, no one questions that every mount is in the gem store. Why? Because every mount is in the gem store. Like, it's an underlying assumption that it's never going to come to the game. It's the same with a lot of other stuff, right? You know, like outfits, for example, and mostly gliders as well, right? And whatever, all these different skins, they're there. And it's because, again, you know, everyone expects it, so it doesn't really bother people. Because that's the way the game is, right? And it's just normal. But yeah.
I want to make really sure that we're not talking like we are talking today about stuff that in general turns people off, and some of that stuff can be in the DNA of a game and can be unfixable. So when I say this stuff, I'm not saying it with the intent that, oh, how can we think of a solution? I'm pointing this out. This is a deterrent for some players. This was a deterrent for me. I'm not blaming the game for it. I understand the need for it, but for me personally, it deterred me.
Yeah, and again, yeah, like we're not really, and this is a part of the broader topic we were talking about with rewards feeling meaningful within the game, because this is an offshoot of that. Now we're exploring, okay, why are rewards so hard for ArenaNet to implement in a rewarding way, right? And a big part of that ultimately is the business model. I think it's very difficult for ArenaNet to give super exclusive rewards in this way, because a lot of the rewards need to be tied to the in-game economy, right? They can't just be like out of thin air, right? They must be tied to the in-game economy, because ultimately when players interact with the trading post by in commerce, right, with gold or whatever, when players are spending gold, ultimately that is actually earning ArenaNet money. Like, I think a lot of players maybe don't think about this, but if you convert gold to gems, you're making ArenaNet money because you're buying gems from another player, right? So a player basically bought those gems for you, and then you buy them, right, from that player. It's not like those gems come out of nowhere. Someone else already bought them. And that's why the prices go up and down, right? Because it's an actual economy. So any interaction with gold, so with the trading post, in any way, essentially generates revenue for ArenaNet, which is not a bad thing. Again, I really want to keep hitting this here. What we're doing here, we're not saying, oh yeah, this game is shit. Oh yeah, this is terrible about this. We're saying, okay, this is an issue within the game, and it's one of the challenges that ArenaNet are going to face in tackling some of these issues. I don't actually think that Guild Wars 2's business model is bad, and I actually want to clarify my position on this. I play Guild Wars 2 because I think it's the best MMO. I actually think that unironically, right? I really enjoy this game a lot. There's a lot of things in it that appeal to me, the variety of content, the combat system, right? Obviously, I've got a lot of friends here as well. I really like this game a lot. The business model honestly doesn't really bother me that much, but I can simultaneously acknowledge at the same time that it does lead to some challenges when it comes to bringing in new players who might be used to a very different way of engaging with reward systems in games, right? I can do that at the same time, even though I actually don't even think the business model is unfair from a monetary point of view. I've got my gripes there. We could talk shit about build templates, right? Which, yeah, there's definitely some very legitimate criticism to be leveled there. We could talk about how the fact that we have loot boxes in the game. Yeah, I think there's some very serious criticism there. I would say that locking skins behind a Black Lion chest, honestly, yeah, I don't think ArenaNet should do that. I don't think they'll stop, right? But it's not good. I don't think that should be in the game. I think that's a bit out of place actually in Guild Wars 2. With the way the game is. The game is very consumer friendly, broadly speaking. Yeah, I think that's not good. But yeah, like it doesn't really bother me. We're just kind of talking about some issues here. Because again, I really want to be quite careful in this tea time. It's a topic that I wanted to treat quite carefully and wanted to talk about for a long time. Because I think it is a conversation that doesn't happen enough. It does tend to kind of slide under the radar or not get talked about or shut down very quickly. But I think that having proper discourse and discussion about these complicated and difficult issues surrounding the game that we all love, that we all enjoy, right? Maybe not these two. Yeah, they hate the game.
Careful, maybe. Yeah, with us making a lot of assumptions there, my friend.
But yeah, that's what we're talking about here, right? Also, there was a really good idea in the chat, actually, saying that, this has been floating around. They don't even need to do gizmos, right, for players who win stuff. There should just be like the recent raid squad that got worlds first. There's like statues of them, like in the PvP lobby, right? Big idea. Love to see it. Huge. But anyway, yeah, I really want to get. I'm sorry if I kind of like slightly derailed there because I really want to wrap up a lot of what we were talking about there and provide context because I think that a lot of this stuff can sometimes get misinterpreted with what we're actually saying and what we're trying to communicate with some of these topics. And I really want to make sure that people listening to this or watching this actually don't kind of the defenses go up, right? When people start criticizing the game, I think often it can be seen as an attack, right? And I want to make it clear that's not what's going on here, right? We're not attacking the game. We're talking about some features of the game and the way they interact with stuff like reward structures and player retention and players coming from other MMOs, right? And playing different style of games and what players are looking for in MMOs, like what they want to be rewarded with and so on. But yeah, I just wanted to contextualize that for everyone because yeah, we've been watching the chat and there's been, a few kind of things like spewing off here and there, right? And just wanted to clear that up there. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, sorry for a slight derail there, gentlemen.
Very good clarification. Very good. Yeah. Very valuable.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, it is important to highlight what the intent of this actually was. It was never intended to come in and shit on ArenaNet. That's
Wait,
not
what?
what? That's definitely what Teapot did not sell it to me as that. We made that very clear. And to be honest, like I'm not really in that position that I want to do that either, because I did that in the past, and I've said my piece. So like me coming here was just to kind of showcase that there are needs for people that Guild Wars 2 doesn't necessarily fulfill. And I guess what we're doing is highlighting those needs and how they're not present. And that's why you play other games. That it's not a bad thing to play like other MMOs, right? Or to be in a community for another MMO, or to have desire to play another MMO. And I know there's like this kind of culture within Guild Wars 2 that if you start talking about another MMO, they go, "Why are you playing that game? Oh, weep game," or something like that. And there's not really like, you're not really willing to hear the opinion because people are just so invested. So yeah, it's just, this was about highlighting those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, kind of on that note, I think that we're in a pretty good position to kind of wrap things up, actually. I think we've gone over everything that we kind of discussed a little bit before the show, a little bit of the plan there. Are there any kind of closing thoughts that you two would like to bring up about kind of this topic, this general topic about Guild Wars 2 from the outside perspective, when someone like marketing, all that kind of stuff? Is there any other topic that we want to have a quick chat about before we wrap things up here?
Do you have anything, Roka?
Not necessarily a topic, but I guess I could have some things to say before we quit, and that's that I generally think that Guild Wars 2 is probably right now the best that, from my perspective, it has been in easily 4 years. Like, I would say that with the current, with what they currently do, if I was still actively playing the game, I think I'd be very happy right now. I'd be fairly happy right now, maybe. Maybe not as happy as I am in Final Fantasy, because, well, what can I say? The game gives me a lot of good content. But I think I'd be decently happy right now, because I think the CMs they're doing are really, really important to kind of create a raid scene. And I think the reason why the raid scene has been really bad is just because they've been always scared to release new, more difficult content. And if they keep doing it, and I really hope they will, I really hope they won't now. I'm kind of scared, actually, that right now, because I haven't heard anything in a while, they'll like have like that long break that makes all of these new formed statics that have now formed to tackle these CMs, break apart again. I think it's really important that there's going to be another CM, and I'm going to need these 10 people that I found now to prog HTCM. I'll need to keep in touch with them. We will want to be played together when the next CM launches, right? This makes, like, this kind of static makes statics form. It makes communities thrive in a way, and I think that's really, really, really important. So even if maybe you're not the kind of player that personally enjoys super difficult content, I'd like kind of encourage everybody to like consider how much of a community driving force new difficult content can be, because it really forces you to group up, make new friends, maybe find a new guild based on it. And you made new friends during HTCM as well, right? I saw Nightcrawl join your group at some point.
Yeah, he's in.
And that's just how that develops, right? You meet 9 new people, you make 9 new friends, and those might be the people that you play the next expansion launch with,
Absolutely. And I think there's actually like a great kind of like mini topic to kind of wrap up on. Actually, I think this is one of the issues that does cause this lack of buzz around the game, lack of atmosphere around the game, is because there isn't a lot of content in Guild Wars 2 that is very social, right? A lot of the game is very soloable, and as a result of that, the community is very atomized, right? There isn't this really big driving force pushing for the game. Everyone's kind of like floating around in their own little bubbles, right? Rather than being a little bit more unified in that regard. That's another, like, in a way, feature of the game, right? The game is supposed to be very accessible, so you don't really have to commit to interacting with other players, whereas other games tend to nudge you a little bit more in that direction. That certainly gives them the advantage, the upper hand when it comes to community spirit and community engagement, for sure, that Guild Wars 2 does lack. And yeah, you're absolutely right there, Rocker. There's been so many groups, like there have been so many players coming out of the woodwork, actually, that, you know, people have never heard of beating this content, right? Like just nobody's, right? Who just like, they've just been gaming, kind of just playing in the background, and yeah, something like this comes along, then boom, they're in. And not everything has to be like this. I'd say that it's happened with the other Stripe missions too, right? For the, you know, the kind of Overlook challenge mode, for like the
1000%.
Yeah, it's not
Absolutely.
just Harvest Temple, like, and I think a really perfect highlight of this would actually be World versus World. The community that's been the most resilient to basically not dying despite not having had a lot of development attention has been World versus World. Why? Because it's an incredibly social game mode, very community oriented. So despite the fact that, you know, it's been a little while since, you know, alliances were announced like 5 years ago, or like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that, something crazy. It's been a while. And yeah, it's still kind of going strong. It was actually recently confirmed by ArenaNet that it's one of the biggest game modes, in fact, actually. So I think it would be a really good thing for Arena to try and target social features like guild features and content developing things that really reward and incentivize players for being social and interacting with other people. Again, guilds, guild missions, right? Bonuses for playing in guilds and stuff like that. Because yeah, right now for sure, the community is very detached from the game, right? Like everyone's in private discords. Everyone is out, everything is external, right? As opposed to internal, right? Like, or, you know, or kind of like public in a way. Like it's all very private, which I think definitely makes the game feel a little bit less energetic and active than it actually is.
This touches on one more topic, actually, that we did mention before the stream as we were going through the stuff we want to talk about, and that's the missing middle class in MMORPGs. I think, especially in Guild Wars 2, you have a very big divide between ultra tryhards and ultra casuals, because there's not much content in between, right? The ultra tryhards, they get really bored with the raids, and then they turn to speedrunning. They turn to like becoming indefinitely better than you need to be to actually clear a raid. And once you enter more content that is challenging to beat, that isn't face roll, you start having more teams that aren't speedrunners that actually clear content. And that's when you create that middle class, again, of raiders that I think is really, really important in an MMO. And when I, in Final Fantasy, look at raid recruitment discords, there's a new raid coming up right now, so people are kind of going wild. I get about 100 pings a day from groups that are recruiting the roles that I play. And 90 of these groups are like mid-core, semi-hardcore, which is something that I think Guild Wars 2 really needs. And that grows on the back of new content. That's why new challenging content isn't just important for the few tryhards. It's really important for the entire game to thrive, basically. So I just kind of want to make it really clear that I believe that this new difficult content doesn't just benefit the 5 hardcore players. It really benefits all the players. That's something that I think people
It definitely does.
misinterpret.
Because it really allows almost like the conveyor belt, right? Because, you know, as you mentioned right now, it's to get to kind of get into this stuff in a way, it's a little bit challenging because there aren't players who are in the position to do that, right? Because everyone is either very, very new or very, very experienced, and it's hard. And because there isn't that much of that mid-core scene, right? There just isn't the quantity required to get this stuff done. And again, all of it's done heavily externally, right? There's no like one place to do this. Like the social features in the game don't make this ideal as well. So yeah, this is a pretty major problem actually, right? And that of course leads to a lot of frustration because when players feel like they can't do this content, even though they'd quite like to, that leads to, again, like a lot of the endgame stuff in Guild Wars 2. I'd even say stuff like World vs. World in PvP almost being underpopulated or underplayed because players kind of run into this wall where it's quite difficult to actually negotiate your way through the social systems because, again, all of it is a little bit tucked away, right? Because it doesn't really have support within the game structure itself. It's very much handled by the players, which again is obviously not ideal, right? And kind of leads to this very big divide between these two scenes, which not only drives animosity but also reduces the accessibility too. Which that's an absolute, that's a classic in Guild Wars 2, right? Your old hardcore versus elitist meme, right? All that kind of stuff.
I actually believe that Harvest Temple CM makes endgame more accessible than it's been before, because if you applied to a hardcore guild, the requirements were much, much, much more than being able to clear one difficult encounter, But now, maybe if you go in there and you say, hey, I've beat this one piece of content that's really difficult, that might give them the amount of trust to actually trial you, even if you haven't done a lot of speedruns,
It absolutely does, because again, those same static groups that have been forming here will then go on to play other content, right? And players will kind of group up for this stuff, and then they'll spread out into the wild, as it were, right? Like stuff like this really does help the entire scene, right? Having that kind of like mid to high level content, it makes the entire thing significantly more accessible. So very exciting to see kind of the next installments of this type of content for sure. It's something that ArenaNet are definitely addressing, but I would love to see them attack it with in-game features as well, like improving the guild structure, improving stuff like the LFG panel and like the social systems within the games for sure. But yeah, like it's definitely like definitely improving for sure. Like this stuff is very, very good for the game, I think.
Yeah, you can't see it, but I am nodding along to what you're saying.
Yeah, he's nodding. I'll just animate him up and down. Right? He's nodding. But yeah, I think on that note, I think it's about time to go ahead and wrap up. So thank you guys so much for hopping on. I know that you've been out of the scene a little bit, maybe keeping an eye on things, popping up here and there. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and chat. I think it was actually a really excellent discussion, actually. So thank you for helping me do this. It's something that I've wanted to do for a really long time, actually, is kind of have that outside perspective, that outside look on the game, like talk about Guild Wars 2 in relation to other games. So I really appreciate it. And I know that it can be difficult to to talk about this stuff without getting a little bit cynical from that external POV after you've maybe had some negative experiences and been frustrated with the game, right? And been a little bit salty here and there. Trust me, I've been there too, right? I think a lot of people in the chat can relate to that as well. But I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys, for hopping on board. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome.
You made me feel relevant again for like a second.
And kind of on that note, then, let's kind of go through this. Rocker, you got any kind of shout outs you want to talk about? You talking about your stream? You streaming these? I don't think you've been streaming a lot, or if at all, actually. Twitter, maybe? Follow you on Twitter? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not even very active on Twitter anymore either. I used to have some Duma takes, but lately I've just honestly been quite happy with what they've been doing, and I feel like I tend to shit on the studio when they do stuff that I consider as bad. And I kind of think credit where credit is due, criticism where criticism is due. So when the game wasn't doing well, there was lots to criticize. I'm not the kind that holds back on that. But when they do good stuff, I like to believe that I'm very fair in giving them credit. So lately, I've just been very positive and boring up there. I guess shoutouts. I'm not streaming myself, but I would like to, shout out Lorenity maybe, because she's playing Final Fantasy right now, and she's a very good Guild Wars 2 content creator. And it's a very fun watch to watch somebody who's not cynical at all about Guild Wars 2 and who's very much, very open about loving Guild Wars 2, still trying another game and just being very open to also loving that game, It's just an overall very positive experience. And I think everybody should be a little bit more open to playing multiple games and not, being... I don't want to say the name of your guild there cynically, right? But don't be hardstuck in one game, right? Be open to multiple experiences and... yeah, have fun.
Yeah,
what's happening?
How have I got the wrong link for you? That must have been incorrect for so long, since before you were on TeaTime, because I haven't changed that for ages. How is that wrong? Wait, what?
I don't know. I messaged that person trying to get that that username, and they haven't used that account for years.
Yeah.
So, they wouldn't give it to me.
Wait, that must have been wrong for so long, actually, because I've had this little bot that kind of links everyone's socials, but it must have been wrong even when you were on TeaTime back in the day. Actually, we just didn't notice somehow.
Oops.
Oops. Okay, but yeah.
That person just got 20 followers and has no clue what's going on.
I'm just gonna go ahead and link the proper Twitter here as well. Actually, real quick, guys. Hang on a minute. Let me.
Don't worry about it, man.
Like, it's the
you just did it again.
no, yeah, I can't actually change that. That's actually like loaded from a file. I can't change it right now.
Right. Okay.
But I can correct that. But anyway, same question to you, of course. Do you have any kind of shout outs, any memes, any things we're dropping down here?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't really stream anymore. Like, you'll probably see me go live like once a month, and it's usually like League of Legends or just something for like an hour or two when I have time. But I feel bad like committing to it because I don't have the time for it. I'm a full corpo or corper guy now. I'm a fucking normie, dude. Holy shit! I don't even know the emote. You know, I only found out about 7TV like yesterday.
Oh wow!
It's just things like that. So yeah, don't worry about my socials and stuff. If you want to, you can follow me, but whatever. Like it's easy going. I'd rather that you follow and stay with Teapot and buy the expansions through his URL and donate and help that guy buy a Tesla. You know, like he needs a Tesla. So yeah.
Well, I
just
very
thanks for having me,
that. Yeah, hey, I really appreciate you. Very, very welcome. It's an absolute pleasure, as always, to have a little bit of a chat and catch up there. And of course, yes, you know, like that's great advice there from Jaw. You know, I have to take over from needing money. Teapot needs money these days. So you know what? If you guys like the stream, hit the follow button. If you really like me, you can hit subscribe. Watch all the other TeaTimes. Let us know what you think about all this stuff in the comment section as well. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this and really get some proper discussion going about this stuff, right? Because I think conversations like this are really important for communicating with players in other MMOs and understanding their concerns and maybe how we can help them understand the game and get into the game. Like, you know, you have to understand like some of the things that players might run into in order to try and make it better and make it fixable, right? Not only from the developer perspective, but also from the community perspective. So yeah, let us know what you think. Follow, subscribe on YouTube, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch as well, subscribe everywhere, hand over all your money, join Discord and talk there as well. I'm going to keep mentioning this to basically peer pressure myself into doing this. I want to rework my Discord, discord.gg/teapot, into the Guild Wars 2 kind of discussion forum, the TeaTime Discord. So definitely June that. June that, dude. Like this, I'm talking about PvP now. Meme joke. Definitely join that and join the conversation about Guild Wars 2. Have the discussions, have the memes. But anyway, that'll just about do it from us today. We will, I'll probably be back to finish the stream, do a little bit of an after show, and actually do some stuff in PvP on NA, funnily enough, okay? I just can't get enough of that, guys. I cannot get enough. But anyway, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. I'll be back in a few moments. Let us know what you think in the comments. Take it easy, my friends, and we'll see you next time.